Alright mates, how's it going? Here's the supercut of the Shadows Rising series, based on the book by Madeleine Roux. Link in the description for people that want to buy the book and check out the story proper, because I add a little bit of humour and stuff just to make sure I'm not stealing other people's hard work. But yeah, grab some popcorn, put on your movie watching pants, and enjoy. Let's go! Anduin Wrynn was currently riding Reverence through the wounded plains of Westfall, as if his life depended on it, and his loyal friend and spymaster Matthias Shaw was having a crap time trying to keep up. "Sire, slow down, damn it! My horse is going to throw a shoe!" But Anduin didn't care. In fact, he just spurred Reverence even faster. He couldn't slow down. Not for anything. "Sire!" Okay, maybe he should slow down. Anduin finally relented, pulling gently on his horse's reins, allowing the spymaster to catch up. "My apologies. That must have been a taxing ride for you old fart. You didn't tell me this was a race. With fair warning, I would have left you crying in the dust, Your Majesty." "Oh yeah? We'll have to put that to the test." "Maybe. But first you're going to tell me why you're riding like an absolute maniac. Last thing we need is you getting thrown and snapping your royal neck." Shaw had a rough way about him, but Anduin actually kinda appreciated his harsh forward manner. Most people bowed and walked on eggshells in the king's presence, but not this asshole. "You know, when I was very young and learning to ride, my father took me to the stables and gave me my first pony. Dappled, gentle, 13 hands. I asked my father why horses were measured in hands. He just grinned at me and said he didn't know, and then yelled at a stable hand, asking if he knew. He didn't either. Poor lad was barely older than I was, looked like he was going to poo himself. Marvin, I think his name was. I didn't know him." Anduin knew Shaw was holding something back. He almost certainly knew Marvin, and Marvin had probably died somehow, in one war or another. Or maybe his house had collapsed in the cataclysm and the ground had swallowed him whole. But Anduin pushed that bitter thought aside. "I was shocked. My father, the King of Stormwind, had just admitted his own ignorance in front of a servant. I even told him as much. Do you know what he said? No. He said, 'Only an absolute moron thinks himself an expert in everything. The wise man admits his limitations and endeavours to know more.'" Both Shaw and Anduin then fell silent for a moment, thinking about that little nugget of wisdom. He wasn't an easy king to serve, but there was satisfaction in the challenge. Same can't be said for all rulers. "You what, mate?" "Oh, there's satisfaction in service to your crown too, it's just a bit more of a challenge. Case in point, you're avoiding my question." "No, Shaw, I was answering your question. I'm acknowledging my limitations. Today was... Anduin desperately tried to find the right word to describe today. Difficult? Nah. Disheartening? Nah, that's not it. Shit? No. Crushing. That was it. Tyrande and Malfurion had buggered off to Nordrassil, and were ignoring any missive Anduin sent. No matter how much Anduin told himself that the rift between humans and night elves could be bridged, the fact that there was a rift at all kind of upset him. He couldn't blame them though. Their home had burned down under his watch. Suddenly, a plume of smoke shot up just west of Saldine's farm, accompanied by a loud boom and a scream. What was that? Caution. Could be an ambush. These are my people, my lands, and your enemies would use that against you. But Anduin could hear the anguished cry coming from the barn and wasn't going to just stand by helplessly, so he charged off, with Shaw once again chasing after him. But as they entered the barn, they just saw 3 men having a heated argument. "Jago, you bloody twat! I said you could shelter in my barn, not use it for your mad experiments." The older farmer then lunged at Jago, but stopped when he heard the unmistakable sound of steel being unsheathed. "Gentlemen, is there a problem here?" "He's no gentleman. He's a lousy drunk, using my barn to brew his bedeviled moonshine. Look at my roof. How am I supposed to afford repairs?" At that point, the farmer must have realised who it was he was actually talking to, because he made a meagre attempt to bow his head. I would have his side of the story too. But as he turned to Jago, the man just spat at his feet and almost fell over. "There. That's all my side of the story is worth. That's all I've left in the world. Nothing. Of nothing. Nothing." Jago then fell forwards towards the king, but was intercepted by Shaw. "I wouldn't if I were you." "Do it. Use that sword of yours. I was there. I saw when the Forsaken Queen turned on her own." Anduin froze as Jago fell on his ass. "Arathi. I was there. My Wilmer. He was there. And he was changed. One of them. All rotten and strange, but still Wilmer. Still the best man I ever knew and loved." Jago's rage then took over again, and he thrust a finger out towards Anduin. "You could have stopped her. You could have saved them." "That is not how you address your king." "My king? Nah. King of Fools, maybe. It's alright, Shaw. I'm sorry, Jago. I'm true. Shut up. I beg your pardon? Jago then picked himself up and started to walk off, but as the fresh air outside the barn hit him, he face-planted the ground, falling inches from the pointed leather boots of Illyria Windrunner. He's still breathing. Fantastic. How am I supposed to pay for this? Jago doesn't have a copper to his name. Speak to Captain Danovan. He can lend you some of the garrison boys to see to the damage. Yeah, bunch of bollocks. Anduin then approached Illyria. You're early. Is early a good sign? No, it's not good news, I'm afraid. My sister is not stupid. She's using all of her dark power to conceal herself. You're the finest hunter I know, Illyria. Not one I expected to fail. We'll keep trying. She can't hide forever. Soon enough, she'll have to show herself. And when she does, she'll have the full might of her enemies bearing down upon her. Anduin stared at the blonde elf, and suddenly felt an unpleasant whisper from the dark recesses of his memory. Once, Illyria had suggested to him that Sylvanas faced N'Zoth. She and Verisa had been convinced it was the wisest course of action. Why not let their most pressing threat fight yet another pressing threat? But Anduin had refused, because that request had seemed absolutely mental. Why had Illyria asked him such a thing? How could she be so blind as to extend a chance to someone as treacherous as Sylvanas Windrunner? And now she'd failed in her one explicit task to track her sister down and bring her to justice. Was she hiding something? Was he being a dumbass by keeping this void elf at his side? No. Illyria had proven herself many times, and she spoke true. Sylvanas was no simple quarry. The hunt would continue, and Anduin, as king, would find a way to keep faith in their odds. That was his duty. Come, let us return to Stormwind and decide our next approach. Sylvanas will not rest, and so neither will we. Thrall, son of Duratan and former war chief, had expected the dry heat and hustle and bustle of Orgrimmar to be slightly overwhelming, considering he'd been living the quiet life recently, in a field of wheat or something. But 'twasn't the case. He'd managed to slip back into the Horde city's rhythm with surprising ease, and in a way, that actually kinda scared him. Things had changed, of course. The Horde had changed. It had become pretty clear that they could no longer be ruled by a single war chief, for example, which was exactly why this council existed, and we're currently sat in Gromash Hold having a little brain trust meeting. Two young Taurens stood at the centre, giving their report. They'd captured 2 Dark Ranger spies in the Northern Barrens, but the buggers swallowed some foul concoction and died before they could be questioned. At least they could no longer act as the Dark Lady's eyes in Durotar though, so it hadn't been a complete waste of time. And that news was good enough, so everyone around the room clapped and cheered whilst the 2 braves stood tall, looking really proud of themselves. Thrall, however, couldn't help but wonder how much longer these 2 would live. How long before they got themselves killed in another pointless war? No, they were putting a stop to that. That was the purpose of this council, to put a bit of bureaucracy in place and stop one person from being able to push the big red button on a whim. Well done. Bravely done. A toast to these fine soldiers of the Horde. Loktar. Thrall raised his cup, but his eyes fell on an empty seat beside Lorthamar. It seemed almost too ironic. Here they were, a council set up in response to Sylvanas' controversial leadership, and yet nobody was sat in her place to speak for the Forsaken. Talanji had made it all the way from Zandalar. The newly risen trade prince of the Bilgewater cartel, Gazlo, was in attendance, so where the bloody hell was the Forsaken leader? But as Gazlo poured himself more ale, 2 figures burst into the room and made him spill half his drink down his front. He mumbled to himself, but at least it appeared that their conspicuously missing council member had arrived. Lillian Voss, interim leader of the Forsaken, as well as Kalia Menethil, who seemed to be watching Lillian Voss's every move, as if she would be tested on it later. And then there was awkward silence, because nobody seemed to know what to say, until Thrall stood up and opened his arms wide.
Your absence was keenly felt. The Horde is not the Horde without the Forsaken. Join us, please.
As they moved to sit down, the Volpyrian representative Kiro piped up. You will find Orgrimmar's finest foods and all the wine or mead you can... you don't... You know what? Never mind. Kiro looked pretty embarrassed, but his little goof actually managed to break the tension somewhat. Gazlo, in particular, thought it was bloody hilarious. The undead have no need for food or drink. Everybody knows that, you furry little knob. May we ask what detained you? Things are a little less heated with the armistice, but Alliance ships still aren't very happy to see our flag at sea. Across from them, the Darkspear troll Rakan hissed and leapt to his feet. They give you trouble? No, we just took the long way round. Added a few days to our journey. Better to be careful in these tense times. Don't want to cause a diplomatic incident. Although I'm sure if we were intercepted, Derek Proudmoore would. The Proudmoores can do nothing for us. Ah, great. Now it was awkward again. The young Zandalari queen rose to her feet and looked extremely rigid at the mention of the name Proudmoore. The Horde could not stop the attack on Zandalar, a failure I took in stride, believing that when we had recovered, we could take the fight to the Alliance, to the Proudmoores. Peace with the Alliance means peace with the Proudmoores, with Jaina. I was foolish to believe my people would have their revenge. Balls. And it had all been going so smoothly. But perhaps Thrall should have expected this. They were all so different, these assembled leaders, with conflicting ideas on what it meant to be part of the Horde, and different visions of its future. But before he could say anything to try and defuse the situation, Lillian Voss just kind of made it worse. Derek is one of us now. You will have to accept that. I have to accept nothing. You need me, and I had thought my people had need of the Horde. Now I see you will not help us seek justice for the siege of Zoldazar. Zandalari justice is not the only justice that matters. The Forsaken have been cast aside, spat on, and ignored for long enough. Derek is Forsaken, and the Forsaken are the Horde. Are the Zandalari not the Horde? Talanji then moved to the centre of the room. Apparently she was now in charge of this meeting. Where is the Horde response? Where is the support for my people? When will you acknowledge our wounds? If we act rashly, then we endanger the armistice. Our resources are stretched thin as it is. We must be thoughtful if we are to commit our navy to your struggles. Perhaps diplomacy is the answer here, and a delegation could be dispatched to Kol Tiras, to delegation, diplomacy. My ancestors be weeping to hear this cowardly talk in Gromash Hold. Well, at least there's still one amongst you who hasn't lost his balls.
We all have our grievances, but those must be weighed against the interests of the Horde. It is not easy, Your Highness. Nobody thought it would be. In time, we can seek to right the wrongs done to the Zandalari.
In time. It was at this point that Thrall realised he was one of the only peeps still sat down. Pretty much everyone else had got up and started arguing over their own little petty grievances. Like G. Firepaw, for example, who was just like, I don't know why I even bother coming to these, to be honest. Unfortunately, it seemed the unpleasant task of restoring order fell to Thrall, despite him really not wanting to be in charge anymore. So he stood up, the rest of the council took notice, and the arguing voices around the room began to die down. But, before Thrall could actually say anything, Talanji stormed out of the assembly.
Perfect. Meeting adjourned. We will eat and drink and come together again.
The rest of the council all looked to the floor sheepishly as he cut his way through the crowd and made his way to the door. What the bloody hell had he agreed to? The only thing this was achieving was giving him a massive headache. As he exited Gromash Hold, the scent of prairie grass and churned earth flooded him with memories. Specifically, a moment not long ago where he'd stood perched on the cliffs of Thunder Bluff with Talanji's nemesis, Jaina Proudmoore, standing beside him.
We've come to this crossroad again and again, Jaina. It always falls apart. What's different this time?
We are. What a load of old shit. The streets outside the hold were full of feasting tables and curious onlookers. There was a festive spirit in the air. And as Thrall smiled at the sight of young orcs hoisted on their parents' shoulders, Zakan, otherwise known as Zappy Boy, ambled up to his side.
What is it?
There's a messenger from the Earthen Ring here.
I said it was feast time.
You'll be wanting to hear this. Thrall sighed to himself. During his time as war chief, what now was a question he found himself asking almost all day every day. He'd only been back 5 minutes and he was already starting to feel like that again. But he turned to face the Earthen Ring messenger.
Yucca.
This was no mere messenger. Anything that might drive this particular shaman from his post at the Maelstrom was dire indeed.
Thromkar, old friend. What brings you to Orgrimmar?
The spirits, Thrall. They're in disarray. They're not their usual peaceful selves. They're kind of pissed off and lashing out. Something is terribly wrong. Meanwhile, in Nazmir, some nasty bitch called Apari was currently standing over another troll as they lay dying. You chose death, Seshi, when you chose her. Which? The troll's eyes then flashed bright one last time before going blank, because he was dead, and the hungry dread tick, sat hunched on Apari's shoulders, started to get a little bit excited. Not now, Death. One sip of his blood and you'll be flat as a coin, all your insides on your outside. The body emanated a foul odour as the skin shriveled, the muscles contorted, and a strange black bile flowed from several orifices. Another troll, Teo, Apari's most trusted general, then approached. This is how it will be. This is how the traitor queen will die. Wretchweed and riverbud root. My own creation. A purge to remove the rot at the heart of this great land, sister. Apari knew a great deal about herbs and weeds, mostly through personal experience. After receiving a nasty injury to her leg, she tried pretty much everything to relieve the pain. And although nothing worked, she gained quite a bit of insight. For example, In the right quantity, wretchweed could be used to purge someone's system of some bad food, or a bit of poison or something. But when dried, powdered and mixed with riverbud, it was lethal. And the death wasn't exactly a barrel of laughs. She deserves to suffer. Where will it be done? Before the whole of her precious horde. She has chosen them over her own people. Now let her die among them. Ancestors be willing. Ancestors be willing. There is more. The Pale Rider is here. He arrived with an unliving elf. They'd be anxious to speak with you. So, they had come. Things truly were in motion. Apari had never felt so alive. So she limped her way out of the cave to greet their guests. Pale Rider, you are welcome here, but in 2 hours we depart. We do not stay long, and the sun never sets twice on our camps. A wise precaution. We have come to discuss our arrangement. Might we speak elsewhere, or is this what passes for courtesy in your swamp? No, not courtesy, but a promise. Nathanos raised an eyebrow whilst the mysterious armoured lady sighed impatiently. Apari could tell that she was extremely dangerous, so she continued. A promise. A vow to my mother, who drank the venom of Shadra, and to all of Zandalar who deserve better than a crown and gods who care not for them. Shadra is gone. Yasma is gone too, but poison lingers. Poison in my heart, and soon, poison in the traitor queen's veins. Meanwhile, back in Orgrimmar, Zikan, who had decided not to rudely listen in on Thrall and Yucca's conversation, had casually fallen into step behind the leader of the Darkspear trolls, Rokan, instead. And he was kind of using Rokan's shadow as a concealment of sorts. He'd always been a shadow, really. First his father's, then Sarfang's. And as Rokan's shadow, he crept along, looking for something interesting to occupy his time. He passed by a drum circle with a trio of dancers. He watched as Gazlo joined that drum circle and did a little dance of his own, and noted how many of the other Mighty Horde members were starting to bust some shapes as well. Everybody seemed to be having a whale of a time, except Talanji. She and her Zandalari contingent stood apart from the rest, looking like a right miserable bunch. Zikan wasn't exactly surprised by that though. The Horde Council had welcomed her warmly, and yet so far, her response had been a bit shitty. She was pretty though. Zikan couldn't deny that, with her sexy tusks. It was at that moment that Zikan noticed that her contingent seemed to be one servant lighter than it was earlier, and sensed an opportunity. May I be of service, Your Majesty? How could you possibly be of service? Your entourage be looking a little light. If you need an errand run or a fresh cup of wine, you are spying on me now. Oh, balls. This had backfired. Zikan could already hear the lecture Thrall was inevitably going to give him, so he threw his arms up in surrender. But as he did, he suddenly lost his balance and fell backwards into Talanji's missing servant, who had returned with a goblet of wine. And that goblet of wine went flying through the air, hit the ground and splashed over the hem of the Zandalari Queen's gown. Clumsy knob! That was the Queen's wine. Just a mistake. He meant no harm. But Zikan had stopped listening to the Queen, because the ugly splotch of spilled wine on her dress was turning black, and the puddle left behind on the ground smelled distinctly of death. Whatever it wasn't wine. What you be serving her? Wine. Just wine. What's the matter, you never seen black wine that smells of death before? The servant, who now looked extremely sweaty, then yanked a dagger from under his tunic. Queen Talanji, behind me! Suddenly, a throwing axe whizzed past Zikan's face, and although that narrowly missed the servant, Thrall then whizzed past shortly afterwards. However, the former war chief reached the assassin a moment too late, because they'd already put their dagger to use, jamming it into their own stomach.
Who sent you? Speak!
She will know our bite. And then he was dead. He was Zandalari. One of my own, but how?
All your people must be held and questioned. There is never just one assassin.
Question your own people.
I assure you.
You can assure me nothing. Not ships, not soldiers, not even my own personal safety. You do not need me here. Zandalar, my home, will always need me, so that is where I will be. All eyes followed as the Zandalari Queen and her peeps stormed off again. All eyes, Zikan noted, except Thrall's. And Zikan himself was a little bit bothered by something. Everything had happened so quickly, but he couldn't help but fixate on the moment when he'd knocked the wine over. He felt certain his feet had been planted firmly on the ground, and he was pretty sure something or someone had shoved him. Rakan then appeared, by his side, smirking. You did good, boy. Those be the reflexes of Kimball. Rakan's sentiments were then echoed by even more people in the surrounding crowd, yelling words like hero, but Zikan didn't like that at all. He wasn't a hero, just a boy from the jungles. Whatever the hell just happened, he sure as hell couldn't take credit for it. Talanji stood atop the Great Seal and admired the view of her home. On a clear night such as this one, she could see all the way to the tops of the mountains to the west. And while she took it all in and felt a sense of pride for the achievements of her ancestors, Ziki, a servant, removed each of her ceremonial bracelets and rings, one by one. With each piece removed, Talanji felt lighter, but also vulnerable. Go. I must be alone now. But my queen, your gown is stained. Later. You are dismissed, Ziki. So the young servant nodded and then left through a hidden servant's passage, and Talanji retreated towards her throne. Sometimes, when she glanced in its direction, she could still see the outline of her father, Rastakhan, sitting there. But he was gone. Dead. Murdered by that Janabitch. Talanji had departed Orgrimmar before anyone could convince her to stay, and although she was happy to be home, she couldn't help but feel like leaving the summit so soon had been a bit of a mistake. If she'd remained and pressed her case, the Horde Council probably would have granted reparations for Zandalar's people. That's all she could expect from them, though. Their precious armistice meant too much to them. Justice for Rastakhan would have to be found a different way. But none of that mattered, because instead she'd left Orgrimmar with absolutely jack shit, except fear in her heart and a black stain on her dress. Had that young red-haired troll not blundered into the assassin and spilled the cup, she'd likely be dead. Bwonsamdi. A grey curling fog then drifted over her feet, filled the throne room, and then boof, there he was, the lower of death. Oh ho ho! The queen is in distress. Why not unload your problems on your old friend Bwonsamdi? I'm not in the mood for your crap. One of my own people tried to poison me, in front of the Horde Council, in broad daylight. My enemies are getting bold. I nearly had your soul then. Is that why you summoned me? Thoughts of death made you think of your old friend on the other side? How flattering, your majesty. What? No, I want to speak to my father. You are the Keeper of Souls, the Lord of Death. Surely you must know where his soul resides. Can you not arrange an audience? What am I? Some servant to do whatever you bid? Think I keep your father in my back pocket? The spirit of a king is no trifle, girl. Everything is a trifle to you. Everything is a game. Bwonsamdi's grin then faded, and he sniffed the air. You reek of death. It came close to you, didn't it? Real close. Maybe you be wanted to ask your father what it's like on the other side. Talanji stood up, waved a hand, and marched forward towards the balcony again. No, I will find that out on my own terms, and no time soon. I ask as a queen who needs the counsel of her elder, nothing more. Bring me the king. Bring me his spirit so I might know his wisdom. I can do no such thing, girl. You don't control me, and I don't control you. Not according to my enemies. Half of Zandalar thinks I answer to you. If they keep thinking that way, I'll never keep control. No wonder that assassin came for me today. I have my father's blood, my father's crown, his lower, and now his rebels. If I can't be rid of them, my reign is as good as over. Look at you, all dooming and glooming. Who do you think protected you today? You might show a little gratitude to your saviour. You cannot take credit for one troll's clumsiness. I gave him a little shove. Just a teensy one. That assassin wanted your death, but I wouldn't give it to him. And I won't give you your father either. Unless... Unless what? Unless you be wanted to make a deal. Seems fair, no? I save your life. You make a deal with your pal Bwonsamdi. Talanji then scoffed. And will you be there to give a little shove the next time? And the time after that? There is unrest in my city, and the Horde will do nothing to stop it. The fate of Zandalar is in my hands. But how can I bring prosperity and peace to people who do not trust me? My father would know what to do. He always knew. Or perhaps his lower Razan would have known even better. And then there was silence. The city and Bwonsamdi suddenly seemed ominously quiet. She'd expected a bit of sass back from him, but instead he just stared at her. What? Nothing to say? Not a single sly word, Bwonsamdi? That's not like you. Our bond is strong, little queen, but that does not make me your servant. I will not summon your father's spirit. You're on your own. Back in Nazmir, Nathanos Blightcaller was currently cheesing it atop a pterodax. He wasn't ashamed to be cheesing it. Retreat prevented outright failure. Sylvanas had taught him that one. The only thing that annoyed him about this situation was that Apari, the rebel leader, had been sloppy enough to miss the Zandalari patrol that had approached their position. And also the fact that there were birds up here and he bloody hates birds. That's not a joke. He genuinely hates birds for some strange reason. Use only their own arrows. The wind carried his orders to the Dark Rangers flying in a V pattern behind him, so they went ahead and did that, and managed to take out 2 of their pursuers on the ground below. The remaining trolls grew wise pretty quick though, and rode their mounts beneath some dense tree cover. We cannot allow them to reach the Banshee's Whale. We'll head south. The mountains are impassable on foot. The Dark Rangers then broke formation and dived down towards the canopy, but a beast much like the one Nathanos was riding then burst through to greet them. Balls. They've got druids. Although the Dark Rangers made quick work of him, if there were any more druids down there chasing them, then flying south wasn't going to make much of a difference. It's no use. They're going to discover us. Never. The Queen's will must be done. Fly ahead. Alert the crew. Bring the ship into the bay. Take the ship to shore. Are you mad? Just do as I say. Even though she was wearing a helmet, Nathanos could still detect that Cyril was glaring at him. She never really enjoyed taking his barked orders, but then again, she never really enjoyed anything. All she ever did was moan and rage at everything. Him, Elune, the world that left her in isolating darkness. He knew how she felt somewhat, but geez, get over it. But Cyril went ahead and did as commanded, and Nathanos focused his attention back down below. Their assailants were running out of jungle, but fighting out in the open could be a mistake. If any of them escaped, the plan would be ruined. So they'd just have to make sure no one escaped. He pressed 2 fingers to his lips and gave 3 sharp whistles, and the Dark Rangers returned to him, back in formation. We take them out in the open. No survivors. The trolls proved no match for the Dark Rangers waiting for them as they came bounding out of the jungle. It was a bit messy though. Tell Moon Warden of our victory here, and have the ship ready to sail. One of the Dark Rangers, Leliaeus, gave a sharp nod and took off, and Nathanos turned to address the rest of his peeps. Loot the bodies and put them into the sea. Make sure they're not found. Remember, we were never here. The Ranger Lord then took off as well, following after Leliaeus, and soon enough he arrived on the deck of the Banshee's Whale. That was close. Too close. I'm beginning to think this Apari bitch is not that reliable. That might have been a trap. I don't think so. I looked in her eyes. The hatred I saw there is real. She wants to be rid of Talanji and the Horde as much as we do, and we can't succeed without her people. We do not need a bunch of unorganized, desperate rebels. 1 squadron of Dark Rangers is worth 200 farmers with pitchforks, and I alone am worth twice that. Your enthusiasm is appreciated, Sira, and noted. However, our task here does not just require precision but utmost secrecy. I still say my talents are better used elsewhere, like at Windrunner's side, where the most killing is to be done. I have no taste for discretion. It's boring. Sira, you are greedy indeed, if you consider the death of a god unsatisfying. One Samdi is the last aching thorn in our Queen's side, and it is our job to pluck him out. Our Queen is determined that you will serve her best here, and it is not our place to ponder such decisions. Are you questioning my judgment? No. You are here, and in being here you have not chosen an easy path, but the right one. We must save this world from itself, and that might require us to swallow the bitter with the sweet. I know you crave death, Sira, but you must deliver it here. If this was not suited to your talents, Sylvanas would not have chosen you. Fine. I will try to consider this mission as the opportunity for mayhem that it is. But still, do you not think we should be at her side? Both the Alliance and Horde hunt her, and if they should succeed in learning her whereabouts, they won't. She will triumph over them both. And do you know why? Sira stared at Nathanos, silently. Finally, she was listening instead of talking and moaning and shit. Because the Alliance leaders do not trust each other. And the Horde, they will prove even less competent. So many voices, each with their own agenda. Impossible. They will accomplish nothing. We are most useful here. That is Sylvanas' determination, and so we will carry out her will. Fine, Blightcaller. I am convinced. Good. See that you remain so. One Samdi is a menace, and knows too much. Once he's dead and the Dark Lady's plans are in motion, there will be no more pain. We will be free of the cruelties of this world. This is an honour, Sira. The Queen has so few loyal servants remaining. We who still stand must not disappoint her. My goddess abandoned me. Sylvanas provides the succour of flesh and blood that will suffice. For the moment. And then she buggered off, leaving Nathanos alone with his thoughts. And as usual, all he was thinking about was Sylvanas. A Kaldorei Dark Ranger called Vithrin then approached. Ah, there you are. Were you spotted? I believe I traversed the highlands unseen. There can be no mistakes, Vithrin. And how exactly were you injured? I ran afoul of some beasts in the highlands, nothing serious. I beseech you, Ranger Lord. There are more pressing matters. Leliaeus tells me word has come from the rebels. Get to the point. Apari's plan has failed. Our spies report Queen Talanji has returned to her palace with nothing but a stain on her gown. She may have been injured in the assassination attempt, but Nathanos somewhat managed to hide his disappointment, although his jaw did twitch a little bit. Then we have much to do. Gather the Rangers, Vithrin. Contact our eyes in the city. Have them spread rumours that the Horde has lost faith in the Queen. Perhaps they're even seeking to usurp the kingdom for themselves. But we're not here to spread a campaign of truth. We are here to create a campaign of fear. Let them doubt, argue, panic. We will make this girl regret ever turning her back on the Banshee Queen. Zikan had hoped to spend the afternoon chillaxing at the Western Earth Shrine, but he currently found himself face to face with an extremely demanding audience.
Was she really gonna die? I bet she's the most beautifulest troll ever.
Zakan could not stop sweating. This interrogation was fierce indeed.
I heard you got stabbed. Show us where you got stabbed.
Children. Zakan will tell you the tale, though it might be too shocking for your young ears.
Piss off. We can handle it. Except maybe Yi. She's a big stupid baby. I'm not. Or two.
Zakan took a piece of linen cloth from his pocket and wiped his extremely sweaty brow. I won't be telling you nothing if this bickering keeps up. The group of children then fell silent, although Zakan couldn't help but feel like he was probably going to fall victim to a few pranks from the little shits at some point in the near future. However, before he could wow them with the tale of how he'd saved the Queen of Zandalar, a portal opened at a nearby bush, and through it popped a Nightborn elf. Zakan recognised him immediately. He often ran errands or delivered messages for Thalyssera. Whatever he had to say must have been urgent, otherwise he probably would have just walked the short distance from Gromash Hold to here. Sorry to interrupt. The council requires your presence, Zakan. Now.
No!
I want him to finish the story.
Zakan has more pressing matters to attend to than the whims of children. I suggest you all return to your studies and stop this foolishness. Zakan then hurried over to the elf. Mate, they're just kids. There's no need to yell at them. But the Nightborn said nothing and just stepped back through his portal. And Zakan, who knew better than to keep the council waiting, squared his chest and stepped through as well. And when he arrived in Gromash Hold a second or two later, Gazlo, Bane, Thalyssera, Lillian Voss, G. Firepaw, Thrall, Lorthamar and Rokan all just kind of stared at him. And it was ever so slightly intimidating. Thank you, Loladrell. Efficient as ever. Welcome, Zakan. You performed a great service yesterday by protecting the Zandalari Queen, but now I'm afraid we must ask even more of you. I only did what felt right, and I told you already, it was mostly an accident.
Perhaps, but when that troll drew a knife, you didn't hesitate to put yourself between that blade and the Queen. An honourable instinct, an honourable act.
Zakan could feel himself relax a bit. It seemed as if he wasn't in trouble, so maybe everything was going to be fine. But no good deed goes unpunished. Ah, balls! Everything was not going to be fine. Punished? Don't terrorise the boy. We're extending a great honour, an opportunity to prove yourself to the council, and to serve the Horde as ambassador to Zandalar. Oh, wait, you're serious? Serious as an assassination attempt? Yeah, kid, we're serious. Pack your bags, you're going as Aldazar. Zakan immediately looked at Thrall and then at Rokan. The two council members he knew best. Rokan just kind of held his gaze for a moment and then gave him one single nod of confidence. I've never been an ambassador before.
We need Talanji in this accord. She has lost faith in us, but you risked your life to protect her. Your youth and inexperience will be an asset, Zakan.
She will most likely underestimate you. Use that to your advantage. Be our eyes and ears. Report to us as often as you can. Any information at all you can gather on her is useful. We cannot lose her as an ally. The room then fell silent again for a moment. Well, do you accept? We would know your answer. Time is of the essence. Did he have a choice? Zakan didn't ask, mainly because he didn't have the balls, but also because it was probably a pointless question. What would Saofang say if he could see Zakan now, struggling to accept an honour he might have earned, but was not sure he deserved? Is this alright? Talanji's our friend, no? But now we're spying on her. We do not send you to do harm. We cannot help her if we do not know her mind. Rakan looked so confident, so calm, not a glimmer of mischief anywhere in his eyes. Then I accept. The council is dismissed. We wish you all haste and good fortune, Zakan. We know you will not fail us. Before Zakan could say anything else, everyone stood up and started to walk out of Gromash Hold, each nodding or gently nudging the young troll reassuringly as they passed. Gazlo even winked at him. Thrall and Rakan were the last in line and stayed as the rest exited. You think he can do it?
I think the young queen will find his presence less revolting than mine or yours.
Why? Why can't you go? I'm nobody.
Saofang didn't think so. I don't think so either. There are things I must do, places I must go. Yucca brought dire news from the Earthen Ring, so whilst you take your place in Zandalar, I will be taking my own journey to Nordrassil to better understand the unrest in the spirit realm.
Take this. Rakan then produced a dagger from his belt. It was light and well balanced, as all things should be. We'd be sending you into a pit of vipers, boy. There will be more assassins, more danger. You might have a shaman's power, but a blade on your belt means you're never unarmed, even when your strength is spent. Cheers. Although, I don't exactly know how to fight well with it. It's instinct. All instinct. Think like a shaman, boy. Fight like a soldier. And for your sakes, blend like a shadow. Meanwhile, with the Alliance... How many? Anduin Rin was currently hanging about in the Cathedral of Light within Stormwind City, patiently waiting for Bishop Arthur to unlock the door leading to the crypts below.
Yeah, let's see. Is it this key?
6. Or rather, SI-7 discovered 6. No one can say for sure how many were washed away by the tides.
It wasn't that key. Maybe it's this key.
More could be in hiding. Shaw sent at least a dozen to monitor the waters between the Zandalari coast and the Eastern Kingdoms.
It's not that key either. Why does this cathedral have so many keys?
Let us continue this where there are no curious ears. The old bishop finally managed to unlock the door, so Turallion and Gen Greymane followed Anduin down into the crypts to continue their conversation. Anduin wasn't exactly excited to see what awaited him down there, but he knew it was his duty as king to see what had befallen troops dispatched in his name. Soon enough, they arrived at the very bottom of the crypts, where several bodies had been laid out, with skin discoloured and lips twisted in agony. Look at the precision. One shot, directly to the heart. Mark the fletching on the arrows here and here. It's been shaved down. That was why Shaw ordered them brought here. What am I not seeing? Zandalari arrows. But these are not Zandalari tactics. I should think not. This is some mischief. Some dark mischief I do not yet understand. There are few archers in the world that could make these shots, my king. The only sort I know of are allied with the infernal Banshee Queen. Dark Rangers. Can we be certain? Certain? No. But I've seen a damned mess of their arrows in my time. The style matches, as does the accuracy. Gen then started pacing backwards and forwards whilst huffing and puffing. Looked like someone was in dire need of a good war keys. What would the Dark Rangers be doing in Zandalar? The Zandalari are allies of the Horde, which wouldn't exactly make them friends with Sylvanas. It could be a warning. Perhaps she sent her rangers to punish the new queen. The Dark Lady was still war chief when they made their alliance. We all know how well Sylvanas takes betrayal. This is an opportunity, Anduin. Don't you see it? Where Sylvanas goes, her Dark Rangers are sure to follow. She may well have revealed herself in committing these murders. We should gather what forces we can spare and sail west. Whether she's in league with the Zandalari or moving against them doesn't matter. This is our chance to finish this. Anduin looked towards Turallion. The paladin did not seem quite as convinced as the king of Gilneath. Now is the time to think, my king, not the time to react. There are still spies unaccounted for in the field, and we must not forget the armistice. Zandalar is a big place, but the eyes there are friendly to the Horde, not Sylvanas. And the Horde want her dead just as much as we do. The armistice you signed is meaningless if we cannot rely on them to share intelligence of this nature. Bollocks. We can rely on the Horde for nothing. How many times must you learn this, Anduin? I know you know better. Now, Anduin did not necessarily trust the Horde, but they could have easily assassinated him outside the gates of Orgrimmar when Sylvanas killed Saurfang. And they didn't, so that had to count for something. Anduin then decided to wait a moment, hoping Greymane would calm down, but he remained a very angry doggy. Again, rash action has harmed us far more often than care and caution. I'm not going to overcommit to what could be a diversion. Turallion seemed to agree with that. We must ask ourselves, why would Sylvanas go to Zandalar? What would she want there? What does it matter? You said it yourself, Turallion. The Zandalari queen pledged herself to Sylvanas first. Perhaps that vow remains true. Perhaps she's turned her back on the Horde, and even now shelters the traitor and her soldiers. Perhaps these brave few were killed for discovering the truth. What to do? What to do? I am reminded, my noble friends, of a day not so long ago, and not so far from here. Arathi Highlands. A gathering meant to be peaceful. Meant to reunite families, torn asunder by forces they could never have anticipated. Human and forsaken families met in good faith, trying to find common ground and common love. And many of them did. And for their trust, their grace, they received only slaughter. I give both of your recommendations equal weight, my friends. Turallion, take Illyria and investigate these deaths. I name you Lord Commander of the Alliance forces. Your task, your only task, is to find Sylvanas Windrunner so we might bring her to proper justice. Hunt her day and night. Use whatever means you must. Turallion bowed his head, accepting the honour. My heart and my sword to the cause. And then the kings of Gilneas and Stormwind watched as the old hero paladin buggered off. A wise choice, your majesty. Who knows what devil's tricks Queen Talanji learned from Sylvanas? There are insects under every rock in every kingdom, even your own. I pray you're wrong. Anduin then looked back towards the bodies on the floor. By the light, Gen. I will see them given all due honour. But how do I ensure they're never forgotten? They knew what it was to serve, Anduin. They were not expecting the life of a baker or a tailor. They knew. No, Gen. I don't think they did. None of us do. None of us know what awaits us in death, what awaits us in the dark without a dawn. The petitioner's request is hereby... The crowd gathered near the throne stared in anticipation, and Talanji kinda loved it. Holding court was probably one of her favourite things to do as queen. Granted. The audience erupted in cheers, and the petitioner in question, a young girl no more than 17 years old, called Navre, blushed and breathed a sigh of relief, and then smiled from ear to ear. Navre belonged to one of the struggling noble houses that had been tied to the traitor, Yasma. And although her family had been cleared of any wrongdoing in a legal sense, they were still kind of suffering from a severe lack of gold and a stain on their family name, which in turn was preventing Navre from being able to honourably marry her love, Keela. But not anymore. Now that Queen Talanji had granted her petition, there was nothing stopping the two young girls from marrying. So that's lovely. Fortune and health to them both.
Happy small things. Good to see. Boring, but good.
The majority of the crowd then started to disperse from the council chambers. It had been a long day, a grueling day, but Talanji didn't mind the fact that a queen's time was never truly her own. It was a sacrifice she made gladly. Her people were her greatest pride. The light of the lower shine on us. I think that was the last one. Oh, spoke too soon. The troll then shoved their way through, waving their arms about. Conk, carry me away. It never ends. Is it true? Is it true what they say? Did the Horde really try to kill the Queen? They want to take the city for themselves. The crowd members that had not quite left the council chambers yet gasped. They were going to stick around for this. Justice! Horde defilers! Traitors! Silence! Please. These rumours are just that. Rumours. But we are part of the Horde. Who tried to kill our Queen? Talanji was kind of tired, but she knew she needed to find the exact right words for this situation. These people could smell a scandal, and they bloody loved scandals. Yes, we are part of the Horde, but only if they support us as we deserve. They will meet our demands. The demands of Zandalar. We will not serve them unless they serve us too. Look! One of them! An assassin! The crowd shifted and formed a sort of barrier around a new arrival to the council chamber. Talanji squinted, trying to make out who it was, but there were people in the way. He's from the Horde! Get him! The crowd then quickly started turning into a mob as people started throwing things and trying to shove the new arrival. And Talanji knew she couldn't afford to have the death of a Horde ambassador on her hands, so she put on her big strong queen's voice. Stop! Let him pass! Everyone in the room then froze before stepping aside, allowing the Horde troll to move forward. And it was at that point that Talanji finally realised who it was. Remove the petitioners. This meeting of the council is at an end. I will meet with this traveller. Talanji had left Orgrimmar in such a hurry that she'd never actually learned this troll's name, and it suddenly dawned on her that had been a bit harsh, considering he'd saved her life. Come, state your business. I am here to serve as ambassador to the Horde. My name is Zakan. Ambassador Zakan. Ambassador? Try spy. Yes, spy. Ambassador. Spy. Eyes. Ears. The Horde is worried about you, Queen Talanji. More than that, they want your friendship, and they won't be given up. Well, they could have sent worse. And by that, Talanji meant they could have sent Thrall, the guy who remained stubbornly loyal to Jaina Proudmoore. What a prick. You want Jonok smash him? No, Jonok. He is under my protection. Talanji then stared at this new ambassador and studied him for a bit, and as he fidgeted, nervous and young, she thought, his inexperience is going to come in pretty handy. Ambassador Zakan, if you are going to serve in this place, then you must know its many twisting halls. Come, I will be your guide. I thought Orgrimmar was impressive, but this is... Talanji smirked. The young forest troll looked as if his mind was being absolutely blown by the wonder of this great city, and it was kind of nice to see. Nothing like this in the Echo Isles. This would be like something from a dream. The palace has always been my home. I forget what it must look like to outsiders. Well, my palace was sand and shrub. The whole village could probably fit in your royal closet. Talanji grinned, but as they turned a corner, her smile faded. She'd been too distracted to realise they were approaching the heart of the pyramid. She'd avoided this part of the palace ever since... Something the matter? I remember loving this place. I played here as a kid, with my friend Parry. We'd chase each other for hours and hours, play hide and seek. I think I was that little girl again when my father died here. Made me feel small, just a child taking a crown and pretending to be queen. This is where I learned the true cruelty of the Alliance and their cursed witch Jaina Proudmoore. I spit on this armistice your council has negotiated. It ignores the pain of my people. But Proudmoore helped us free Bane, and she was there to stand with us against Ashara. You said you felt like a little girl when you took up your father's crown, but you changed. You'd be a real queen now. I saw it with my own eyes. The way you speak, your people listen. The Horde be listening too. So you're going to tell them about this then? No, Your Majesty. Your grief is your own. I lost people too. One father, then another. Another. Our High Overlord fell to the Banshee Queen's magic. He wasn't perfect. He was a killer. What he did to the elves, to their tree, that's something too big for me to judge. But he taught me how to be a soldier, how to stand tall. But Saurfang's gone. Nothing will change that. I only hope one Samdi helped him to his rest. Hey, maybe you could ask. He is close to you after all. Not that close. No? His throne is tied to the lower of graves. Well, that's what they say. And who is they? Everyone, Your Majesty. Everyone. Well, you're smarter than you look, Ambassador. Before Zakan could respond or even blush at the compliment, Talanji noticed a bit of a ruckus behind him, and as she approached some guards to ask what the matter was, a spear flew through the air and struck one of the guards right in the face. The Queen's first thought was, how the bloody hell have rebels made it so deep into the palace? And her second thought was, I'm not going to die here, not in the same place as my father. Get behind me. Talanji sprang forward and did what she was told, and Zakan followed, close to her heels. Outside the room, the corridor was filled with bloodthirsty whoops. Hunt the Queen, whoop whoop, hunt the Queen, whoop whoop whoop. Is there another way out of here? No, we stand and we fight, as the Queen commands. Zakan unsheathed the dagger that Rokan had given him, and ignited it with his Zappy Boy powers. They're coming! At least a dozen trolls then barreled into the chamber, but because they were kind of bottlenecked, the guard managed to take out 2 of them in one strike, almost immediately. And thanks to Talanji's protective shield, Zakan's skills with the elements, and the fact that several Royal Guard reinforcements arrived pretty quickly, the rebels ended up kind of just embarrassing themselves, really. I want them alive. Unfortunately, the rebels did not plan to surrender. Instead, they hurtled towards the guards and impaled themselves on the sharp and ready halberds aimed in their direction. Except for one, donning a curious black mask. He sprinted directly at the Queen and pressed a knife to her throat. The Widow's bite be here, traitor Queen. They be all around you. A plume of smoke then rose from behind him, and one bony finger tapped on the masked assassin's shoulder. Boop. One Samdi then vanished as quickly as he'd appeared, but before the assassin could turn back to Talanji and be all like, what was all that about? Zakan stuck his dagger right in the asshole's neck, so he died. Talanji, meanwhile, was fixated on what the assassin had just said. The Widow's bite? Impossible. Both Shadra and Yasma were dead, so why would they still be a thing? Are you alright? I'm fine. Tell me there are survivors. None, Your Majesty. They all killed themselves. Talanji then glanced around and saw the blood and death once again heaped on the floor in this part of the palace, and it was at this point that she realised that both Thrall and one Samdi had been right. These assassins were not going to stop coming. Double the patrols. Seal the palace. Zakan, I wish to speak to the Horde Council. We have some things to discuss. We make quite a team, little Zappy boy. Talanji had commanded Zakan to wait outside while she addressed the Zanchuli Council's concerns about the recent attack, but she'd failed to mention that the lower of graves would be keeping him company. You're one Samdi. What could you want with me? Ah, so your mouth does work. And your eyes. I could want one thing from you, and that's to give my thanks. Thank me? For what? Protecting my investment. Zakan had grown up with tales of the trickster god, and yet that still hadn't exactly prepared him to deal with the real thing. What if he said something stupid? Or did something inappropriate? Your lives are all so adorably fleeting. You come and go, but some of you be coming and going in more interesting ways. I don't know if that's true. Feels like I'm just in the right place at the right time. And? How do you think the powerful become that way? It ain't always the smarts, let me assure you. The voices from within the council chamber grew louder, more agitated. I don't want power. I just want to make the Horde Council happy. They sent me to watch the Queen, that's all I am to do. One Samdi then stroked his chin thoughtfully and leaned in closer. So what do you think of her then? Our Queen. I think she's in trouble. You see clearly, boy. There is trouble everywhere. A sickness festers. Here, with your Horde, and in my own domain. Zakan swallowed, but his throat felt like razor blades. One Samdi drew closer still, sizing him up, and chuckled at the fear deep within the young jungle troll's eyes. Your eyes show me everything, boy. It is time I showed you my gratitude. You helped me save the Queen twice now, and that deserves a gift. Will you accept? Zakan could practically hear his wise granny screaming at him from beyond the grave. There's a reason they call him the trickster god. What's the gift? Can't tell you that, but I can tell you this. 'Tis a vision of death. A vision you'll be wanting to see. How about a gift for a gift, Take this vision of death from me. In return, you make sure one thing happens. If I have to give you something in return, then it's not a gift. Do you want it or not, boy? It was the second time in as many days that Zakan felt like he wasn't really being given a choice here. What do I have to do? The Zandalari must remain with the Horde. She must sit on the council. Use all your considerable charms, boy, and make her see that this is the only way. It'd be best for Zandalar, and even better, best for me. Huh. Maybe it wasn't a trick. Zakan was in Zoldazar for exactly that reason anyway. Why can't you convince her? The Queen doesn't like to take advice from old one Samdi, but she might just listen to you. Okay, show me the vision. And then, the world went dark, and for a long moment, all was quiet. Zakan couldn't help but think he'd made a massive mistake, and one Samdi had just killed him. But a different world then appeared around him, with mountains, and a sea of grass, and a bunch of Talbuk running around. Zakan reached out to touch the long grass, only to find it wasn't actually his hand at all. It was a much larger, stronger hand, scarred from war.
Father, that was an easy shot. Don't tell me age has made you soft.
An orc then approached with a familiar face.
Wake up. Another herd approaches. Mother will have our hides if we return empty-handed.
Memories flooded Zakan, but they were not his own. Memories of a wife named Remda, and a son named Dranosh. His chest flooded with pain before turning sweet. Varrock Sarfang had come home, and was finally reunited with his family, in death.
Father? Yes, I'm ready, Dranosh. Lead on.
And then the world went black again. Reeling, Zakan touched his own face, to find it was troll-shaped again, and could feel the tears rolling down his cheeks. And as the world he knew reappeared and one Samdi stared at him, he sank back gratefully against the chamber door. Will it be like that for me? Will my father be waiting for me? Now that would ruin the surprise. Did you see what you needed to see? I think so. Little Zakan, walking in the footsteps of giants. But keep your eyes up, eh? Even giants trip. I know it's you, sister. Do not try to escape me. Illyria Windrunner was currently wandering through a sickly forest, and although she had thought herself the huntress, she was slowly starting to realise that it was in fact her that was being hunted. But she wasn't going to cheese it. Sylvanas needed to be brought to justice. Close now. So very close, sister. I will not stop hunting you. I will never stop. Then what are you waiting for? Suddenly, Sylvanas was no longer racing ahead of Illyria through the forest, but instead appeared directly behind her. And as Illyria turned, her forsaken sister did her scream, and shadows poured from her mouth. And Illyria suddenly found herself smothered with an icy grip. The whispers were right. The void. It told me to kill you. I should have listened. You could never best me, sister. The end will come quickly now. You'll see. As death crept nearer, the void cried out to Illyria, begging her to give over her soul entirely and become a manifestation of power. And it was bloody tempting.
Abandon your flesh.
Illyria gasped for air, running out of time to make a decision, when two figures suddenly emerged. A half-elf with golden hair and a human man, broad and bronzed. Arator, Terrellian. But the half-elf and man didn't seem to notice her at all. They just stared forward, with eyes glazed over in terror. And then their eyes exploded. Their skin went grey, and they turned to ash. No! Did the whispers tell you this would happen, Illyria? Did they warn you that this would be the cost of standing against me? Bah! Illyria suddenly awoke from her nightmare and very nearly fell off her horse, only for a strong hand to steady her. Terrellian. His touch was soothing, and for an instant, the terror from her dream dissipated. You fell asleep in the saddle, Illyria. It was so quiet I didn't even notice until now. That must have been some nightmare. You have no idea. We should stop soon. Terrellian's skin seemed to absorb the moonlight that filtered through the midnight clouds of the Arathi Highlands. The fact that Terrellian was a paladin of the light forged by Zira, and Illyria was now void-touched and dark thanks to Laura, understandably caused a bit of a rift between the two of them. Hell, they even slept in separate tents. But despite the fact that it seemed almost impossible for their relationship to work anymore, Illyria could see the poetry in it. There is no light without shadow, after all. The men are exhausted. A brief rest will lift their spirits. I could use a moment's stillness myself. No, they can rest after we find these refugees. Illyria, we ride on. Terrellian must have seen something in her gaze because he left it at that, although they were kinda interrupted anyway. My lady, my lord, Celestial Nightgiver arrived through a spatial rift, accompanied by a light-forged Draenei called Sen. Sen didn't look particularly happy about travelling through a void portal, but whatevs. What have you found? Celestial then pointed towards a rise north of Thandal Span, and as Illyria squinted, she noticed a thin ribbon of smoke. Just as Trollbane instructed. Are they on the move? No. They look entrenched. Mostly women and children. These are not soldiers, my lady. Then we take them now, before they can scuttle into the hills. Should we not be careful? If there truly is a Dark Ranger among them, a Dark Ranger would know to hide better. And if by some chance they are among them, then we must strike, and strike hard, before he can run. And so, they moved swiftly and stormed north, until they came upon a ramshackled encampment of tents and dugouts. None of you will be harmed so long as you remain calm and answer our questions. A robed Forsaken man stood guard in front of a family of frightened orcs, a mother, a baby, and a little toddler boy. This may be a dead end. Danath Trollbane assured me his outriders spotted a cloaked man, red eyes, armed, with a group of civilians. The Alliance spies washed up not far from here. Well, it would be one hell of a coincidence. One of them knows something. One of them will talk. Alliance dogs! Where is your compassion? These are innocents, homeless and starving, just pawns in your endless war. You speak for all, then? Illyria noted flecks of herbs sticking to the Forsaken man's collar, plus his fingers were stained green. And then the whispers began, as they always did.
Twist his brittle bones until he speaks.
We have no intention of spilling blood here. Give us the information we seek and we'll send you on your way. We'll even throw in some blankets and stuff. Some of the assembled civilians exchanged looks and seemed a little bit more hopeful at the promise of blankets and stuff. But Illyria's gaze then fell again on the mother orc and her children, drawn there by some tendril of curiosity. At first she'd only seen the woman's hunger, but now she was noticing something else. The orc was rocking backwards and forwards and not daring to glance at any of the soldiers. She was nervous about something. However, Illyria didn't notice the young orc boy rush forward. Turallion stepped forward and intercepted the boy, lifted him in the air and did a little twist, and then plopped the kid back on the ground again. Not today, boy. Illyria then crouched down and placed both hands on the orc boy's shoulders. I will tell you what I told my own son when he picked up his first blade and played at being a soldier. Whatever your elders have told you, war is not glory. War is seeing people at their very worst, and choosing to protect them anyway. Now go back to your mother. As the boy raced back into the arms of his grateful mother, the whispers in Illyria's mind grew louder and more insistent. She's the one. I will speak with her privately. Illyria, wait. Turallion then turned to Celesil and motioned to the captive refugees. See that everyone remains calm. Give them food and drink. I must speak to her ladyship briefly, Captain. The Void Elf captain saluted and moved to organise the rest of the men and get those things done, whilst Turallion and Illyria retreated down the hill, away from everyone else. How do you think we should proceed? However we must. The mother knows something. You were too quick to offer them food, Turallion. We could have bartered for information. The king was clear. Our orders are to find Sylvanas at any cost. The light compels me to have mercy, Illyria, but I hear you. I do. I also heard what you said to that boy. Is this us at our very worst? I see visions, Turallion. So many visions. 1,000 futures in which we failed to stop Sylvanas. Each one more monstrous than the last. And I would become more than my worst self to stop it. Yet the void often lies. Of course it does. I don't blindly believe. I question and I wonder what the void seeks to tell me. What wisdom is buried in the deceit. And after peeling away the layers of horror and destruction, there is only one conclusion. Complacency and inaction will be our doom. We have our orders. It gives me no pleasure to interrogate civilians, but what choice do we have? Let me talk with her. Please, give me a chance to pursue this the right way. Let's not forget who we are, what separates us from Sylvanas and her ilk. Turallion reached out towards Illyria, closing the distance between them in word and in bond, and she relented. What a bitch. Fine. Speak with the mother. And so, they head back up the hill. Tell me your name, please. You may have mine first. Turallion, Lord Commander of the Alliance. You need not fear me, or any of us. We have no desire for bloodshed, only information. Now please, madam, your name? The orc hesitated for a bit, and then muttered something that Illyria couldn't quite hear. Thank you. May I ask you some questions? Ask. So Turallion did ask. Several times. First nicely, then more directly, then with growing impatience. He tried bribing her. Nothing worked. The orc refused to talk, and after about 50 minutes, he gave up. Her mouth's clamped shut tighter than a darkwater clam. I noticed. What do we do? Illyria knew what she wanted to do, but she needed to hear it from Turallion. It's easy to say what we must, but I don't particularly want to. Turallion, how many more hours should we waste? She knows something. Her stubbornness only proves it. She refuses to speak because she knows she will incriminate herself or the others. Then we should question the others, or take the information we need. Take it now. Is this who we've become? Under different circumstances, those words might have wounded Illyria, but right now she didn't give a shit. My sister has not known a worthy adversary for a time now. She has outsmarted, outplayed and outwitted us because she is not shackled by good or evil. She's freed by her own willingness to pursue the mission no matter the cost. Is that admiration I hear? There is nothing left of my sister to admire. Were she here now, I would fill her head with visions of terror until it exploded. Right. Okay then. Whatever the cost. Let's do it. Round 2. What is your name? Yeah. Her name is Galzus. Tell me what you know about the Dark Ranger that travelled with you recently.
What would a Dark Ranger want with us?
An excellent question. What did he want with you? Where is he? Galzus growled and spat on the ground, narrowly missing Illyria's boot. Wrong answer. The void invaded the orc's mind easily, commanded by Illyria's experienced hands. The old ones could use the smallest thought to drive a person mad, and to retch any information they wanted from an unwilling subject. Hold her. Duralian did as he was told, grabbing hold of the orc and securing her to the ground, and Illyria continued to sift through the orc's memories and thoughts, each second that passed plunging the mother into greater agony. Deep within the orc's mind, a pair of red eyes caught Illyria's attention, a clear vision of a Calderi man twisted by her sister's undead touch. Meanwhile, the orc woman shrieked even louder, her back bending at strange angles as she fought the pain tunneling through her mind. Stop! For pity's sake, let her go! I will tell you of the Dark Ranger. I swore an oath of silence, we all did. The Ranger demanded it, but I'll tell you whatever you want to know. Illyria stumbled backward, ripped away from her work by the Forsaken man's sudden outburst, but the comforting hand of Turalian grazed her lower back. He was with us a week ago. What do you want to know? Just the truth. Where did he happen upon you? Off the road near Stromgard. He was coming from Hillsbrad, had some trouble with his horse. It threw him, he got injured, and then some raptors tried to have a nibble or something. I'm a healer, you see, an apothecary. Apothecary Cotley. I look after these people, and I looked after him. Go on, what happened next? What did he say? Not a lot. Was headed south. Fouldeer's Cove. He was chartering a boat. Did you catch their name? Vizrin, I think. Thank you. The Forsaken man then rushed over to attend to the orc woman, who was groaning and babbling incoherently. Illyria knew what she'd done. The orc's body was fine, and her mind would mend in time, although there will be scars. Your orders? Give them more food and blankets, whatever we can spare, and urge them to find somewhere else to go. The Witherbark will raid them otherwise. And the apothecary? Take him to Stormwind. He may know more, and we can't afford to miss a single detail. Back in Nazmir, Apari lit the final stick of incense and gave the fragrant smoke a big whiff. It kinda hurt her lungs as she inhaled, but it was all part of the ritual, so whatevs. Plus she was used to pain nowadays anyway. Her injured leg ached constantly. Her lieutenant, Teo, had mentioned that she knew a Volpira that was talented enough to amputate it cleanly at the knee, but Apari had refused. It was a reminder that time was short, that not a single moment could be wasted. I mean, she totally could just write that on the back of her hand or something, but okay. Is everything ready? I stand ready. Our assassination failed, Teo. The Horde will come looking for answers. We attacked the Queen on their soil, but we cannot allow them on ours. Their numbers are too great, and they will overwhelm us and the Pale Rider before our justice is had. The storm will keep them at bay, Apari. This magic is old as the Empire itself. We will not fail. All is not lost. Apari snorted. When the Pale Rider sees this, he will not doubt us again. He thinks he is powerful. He knows nothing of our real power. This will stop all of his complaining and show the reach of the Widow's bite. Apari then gazed around at her assembled rebels. They'd gained quite a few new followers recently. More and more Zandalari had left their homes in Dazara Law to join their ranks. The Widow's Bite had obviously gained quite a name for itself, which was a bit of a double-edged sword, really. New followers meant they would only get stronger, but Talanji and her army would also start to take them much more seriously now. It will take all of our power, all of our considerable might, to shake the seas and command the clouds. Chant with me now, brothers and sisters. I need your voices. Let the heavens hear you. Let your will be known. Those gathered around Apari did as they were told and started to chant slowly, and the gagged and bound nobleman from the palace started to moan and groan, because he knew a sacrificial ritual when he saw one. Apari then limped towards the soon-to-be sacrificed man. She couldn't help but wonder what he must have thought of her. She knew him, knew his family, because she'd been just as rich and noble too once, just as beautiful and sought after as Talanji herself. Even General Jack Rosette had often been like, homina, 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 whenever she'd walk by. But all that was in the past. She wasn't rich anymore, and she was kinda ugly. Her leg was all infected and smelly. No more frivolities. No more games. The Widow's Bite was her purpose now. Her mother's legacy was her only concern. Apari then removed the gag from the old nobleman. You won't be needing this anymore. You don't need to do this. You want gold? I'll give you gold. Please. Please, Parry. I know you. It's me, Bazine. There's no need for all of this. I'll give you anything. My daughter is to be married soon. Let me live to see it. Ah, you gave your daughter away. And this be a mercy. Keep your gold and your promises, sacrifice. But don't be stingy with your screams. Abari then raised her sacrificial knife and immediately brought it down again and stabbed Bazim. Navre, forgive me. Bazim's eyes then rolled back, and his blood, the fuel for the storm, began to flow through the channels carved into the stone. By flowing, foaming blood, we call the sea to rise. Blood! 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 The blood flowing from the sacrifice ignited, and the ground beneath the parry began to hum and glow. By wind from dead lungs, we call the clouds to seethe. Wind! 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 Blood be fire! Fire burn bright! Light the skies and show us your might! Apari herself then started to glow, with flames dancing around her form, whilst the chanting crowd kind of lost their shit a bit and started dancing and laughing and having a whale of a time. The flames then abruptly snuffed themselves out, and the wind died down, but a distant rumble to the east then confirmed their success. Soon, the skies above the Zandalari coast would thicken with black clouds, with waves below towering taller than ships, and Apari closed her hands together, feeling really smug about it. For that brief moment, where power had flowed through her veins and her followers were happy, she felt a release from all of her suffering, all of her pain. Teo then walked over and smiled. Yasma would be proud. Illyria, Duralian, you found anything? Jaina Proudmoore appeared through her portal to check on the pair's progress, or lack thereof. She'd been sent by Anduin because he was getting a bit impatient. Days had passed, with no word from them, and no indication as to whether their lead in the Highlands had borne any fruit. But Jaina was a little bit surprised at what she saw when she arrived. A human man, sprawled on the ground, as Illyria void banged his mind, and Duralian used his light powers to hold the man in place. Duralian was the first to turn and face her, his glittering chains holding the man down, vanishing in a poof. This man and his family sheltered one of the Banshee Queen's dark ranges. But Illyria didn't acknowledge Jaina at all. Apparently, she was too busy making the man on the ground scream in agony. And you know this how? Did he resist? The father refused to answer our questions, but he possessed a suspicious dagger. A dagger that would look more fitting in a forsaken scabbard. Don't you agree? Jaina took hold of the evidence and examined it. She couldn't deny it did bear a resemblance to those used by Sylvanas and her chosen guards, but sometimes people do just have weird transmogs. A group of refugees led us here. Their apothecary treated the ranger for wounds and then he left for the coast. Visrin. Do you know him? Jaina considered the name, but also couldn't help but think about how disgusting Illyria's current actions were. Never heard of him. No matter. We'll find him soon enough. The man on the ground went silent and limp, possibly dead, and Illyria inhaled deeply, her eyes lighting up as if she was almost excited, and then turned to address them. Yes, we will find him soon enough. They provided a skiff sturdy enough to sail deep water. The idiot ranger was quite specific. Needed to sail west. Only thing worth sailing to directly west of here is the Zandalari coast. Although she was unhappy with their method, Jaina couldn't argue with the result of their combined light-void coercion techniques. Hopefully it was just a desperate measure taken in response to limited time, not their new favourite thing that they'll be doing all day every day. Does the king know you're employing these tactics? The man on the ground then moved a bit. At least he wasn't dead. The king was quite clear. We are to use whatever means necessary to extract information. Now we know Sylvanas has her sights on Zandalar. Our scope has narrowed, and I can only imagine King Anduin will be pleased. If this is how we must behave to achieve victory, then he is not pleased. Nor am I. I assure you, Jaina, all will make sense in time. Illyria didn't harm him that much, and the light will soothe whatever now ails him. I'll make sure of it. I'd never let the void within her rage out of control, and I would never need him to control me. Right. Jaina then pushed past the two and kneeled beside the trembling smuggler. Carefully, she rolled him onto his back, cradling his head, and quickly observed his face to see if she knew him. He's told me everything. To dawdle here with him is to waste precious time.
I'm sorry. My family. I couldn't feed them. The storm, it's kept the fish away.
And a dagger that fine would fetch a tempting price. When it comes to those we love, we always do what we must. Your honesty is your penance, sir. So I will tell you now, if you have anything more to say. Illyria sighed impatiently, but the smuggler started to nod.
The ranger. He must reach his destination before the White Lady is full. After, no ships will pass.
You what, mate? What'd he say? What about what? Jaina frowned. No ships will pass, eh? When is the next full moon? 6 days, I think. And we have but 6 days to reach Zandalar safely. I will return to Stormwind at once and relay all of this to the king. Not missing the subtle emphasis on the all of this part, Illyria shifted to the right and stood exactly where Jaina had planned to pop her portal. The two women then locked eyes and Jaina felt a chill prickle in her palms. A warning from her own instincts. Is this truly our highest priority, Jaina? Tattling? All will make sense in time, Illyria. I go only to apprise King Anduin of your progress. And to tattle, Jaina thought. Anduin could not possibly know the extent of what Illyria and Turalyon were doing in his name, and he sure as hell wouldn't condone it. They were setting a dangerous precedent. So, as soon as Illyria got out of the bloody way, Jaina ported back to Stormwind with great haste. She stormed into the throne room of Stormwind Keep, only to find the king wasn't there. But two sentinels then pointed over to the map room, so she stormed into the map room of Stormwind Keep. Anduin, unsurprisingly, was hunched over a bunch of maps and books and charts like a nerd, whilst Gen Greymane stood by his side. Jaina didn't particularly want to tell both of them what she'd witnessed. Gen did have a bit of a temper. Please tell me you bring good news. We have 6 days to catch a fishing boat headed to eastern Zandalar. When the full moon comes, the waters will become impossible to sail. A dark ranger called Visrin told all of this to a smuggler. At last, we'll summon Matthias Shaw. He'll be the best choice to give chase. His sea legs are quite strong since our campaign in Kul Tiras. I have no objections, but should we not send a larger force? We can't risk alerting the Horde of our presence there. Zandalar is under their protection. Our ships in the area is one thing, but making landfall could be seen as an act of aggression. Jaina is right. The armistice is too fragile. We can't survive another war right now. Precautions must be taken, and Matthias can be but a shadow when he desires. Go, Gen. Go find him.
Where's Matthias? Where's Matthias, Gen? Who's a good boy?
Gen bowed to Jaina on his way out, but he was pretty bloody excited about where Matthias was. But now it was just Jaina and Anduin, and the Lord Admiral decided to pick her next words very carefully. Anduin, I have concerns. We all do. These are concerning times. Oh, Jaina, what is it? You look truly troubled. Illyria and Turalyon tortured that smuggler in front of me. She used the void to infiltrate his mind, whilst he held him prisoner with chains of light. It looked unspeakably painful. I worry that their tactics represent you poorly, my king. Every one of us, every soldier, is in service to your crown. We stand under your banner, and if their actions are sanctioned by your rule, what does that say about us? Anduin didn't speak for a very long time. He shook his head, turned away from Jaina, paced backwards and forwards for a bit, got distracted by a large brazier in the corner, until finally, what does it say? It says we will do whatever we must to bring murderers to justice. It says we will not forget those lost in war. It says we will not forget Teldrassil or Lordaeron, not forget the flames blazing over the veiled sea, or the fires reflected in the eyes of 1,000 mourning children. There was a time not so long ago when you were not above swinging the harsh hammer of retribution. I have not forgotten, Jaina. Have you? Oh, great lion, your heart is becoming steel. Jaina's heart had once done the same, hardened by the bomb that destroyed Theramore. Vividly, and sadly, she remembered telling Varian in no uncertain terms that the Horde must be utterly annihilated. It had taken a long time for her to thaw, and remnants of that icy hatred still lingered. I have not forgotten, but I also remember your father once warned Vol'jin to uphold honour or be ended. I wish more than anything, my king, to see your reign endure, and be remembered fondly, for you to be remembered in the same breath as your father. Difficult decisions have to be made. I trust Turalyon and Illyria to know where the line of decency is, and not to cross it. Would their statues preside in our city if they were without honour? People change. People do change. But I trust Illyria and Turalyon. Stormwind wouldn't even exist without them. They're woven into the very fabric of our kingdom's tales. Seemed like there was no swaying Anduin. That much was clear. So, Jaina turned to go, leaving him with one last murmured plea. Clarity and time are the final editors of that story, Anduin. I would know. What do you think of her? The bold Ava. Say it with me. The bold Ava. Has a certain ring, doesn't it? Christendom herself. The old name was, well, let's face it, it was crap. The Prowls. Can you believe it? I'm sorry, pardon me? The Prowls? Matthias Shaw stared straight ahead, convinced that if he said nothing and just stayed still, then Flynn Fairwind would leave him alone. But he was wrong. What even is the Prowls? Sounds like something you'd pick out of your teeth. No, I like this new name better. Can you believe I won her in a dice game? Who would be stupid enough to wager this gorgeous girl? You? And you'd be pissed? Yep, absolutely hammered. Well. You know me well, Shaw. Do a bit of digging before you came aboard. What does the dossier on me say, by the way? Devilishly handsome, irresistible in every conceivable way, deadly with a blunderbuss. We should have another day. Survival weather. Grigsby, to the helm. Keep speed, my lads and ladies. Aim for the flats. Rig out the storm sails and watch the decks. Nobody overboard on my watch. Tides be kind, I hope they're quick enough. Honestly, this is pretty bad. If the storm sail isn't up soon, then we're all well and truly The wave knocked both men right across the ship. Below deck. Now. You don't have the sea legs for this, and I am entirely too drunk. It wasn't the most dignified retreat. They basically had to crawl on all fours to reach the safety of the steps leading below, but they made it eventually. Are we to survive this? Huh? Oh, yeah, it's fine. Completely fine. We live for storms like this. Keeps us all on our toes. My crew will bring us through, you'll see. Fairwind then predictably moved to a nearby liquor cabinet and grabbed a bottle. Just something to settle my gut. Sure. We should have had more time. Maybe your source lied. Maybe. Or maybe this is just the opening act, and the real show hasn't even begun. I hadn't considered that. Well, if your source was right, then this is indeed just a taste. The seas were meant to be impassable, yes? And ta-da! We've passed. Oh, spoke too soon. The sailor then burst through the door, his clothes wet but also somehow burnt. Fire? How can there be fire? Lightning, Captain, and... never mind. The captain pushed past the sailor and head back upstairs with Matthias Shaw chasing after him. The spymaster was also curious as to how there were fires, and when they arrived back above deck, they saw the rain and the waves had seemingly calmed down, but a whole bunch of flames were spreading from the mainmast to a bunch of barrels, full of gunpowder. Well, that's a bit of a ball ache. A woman then slid past them quickly, arms raised, and with curious Tide Sage magic, brought water streaming up the sides of the hull before it cascaded gently across the deck, putting the fires out one by one. And the ship erupted with cheers from the rest of the crew. The worst of it seemed to be behind them. Well done, Melly. Well done. But Matthias wasn't exactly in a celebratory mood. The mainmast was damaged, the sails were burned, and the provisions, and he still couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over yet. Message for you, sir. I mean, a shark. A thing for you, sir. The sailor that had been wet but also burned handed Shaw a wind-up shark. Gnome technology, specifically designed to carry covert messages at sea. Much trickier to spot than a pigeon, apparently. Is it always like this with you? These are fraught times. I don't cease being spymaster simply because I'm on a boat. Shaw trusted the seafaring folks to see to the damaged parts of the ship, so he retreated back below deck to see what his spies had uncovered. But Flynn Fairwind just went ahead and followed him. Bit paranoid, are we? Matthias sat down and started to unroll the messages whilst Flynn also made himself comfortable. That for your girlfriend? Hardly. Intelligence reports from my agents within the Horde. Oh, very spicy. Very paranoid. Just because we signed an armistice with the Horde doesn't mean we aren't watching them. Only a fool mistakes peacetime for complacency. So what's new with the Horde then? Any betrayals are brewing? Matthias skimmed the messages quickly. They were written in code that basically only Matthias and people trained in his specific style of shorthand could read. Narcilla Keensight, codenamed Lancer, had been keeping an eye on Lorthamar. She had no loyalties to the Horde or the Alliance, only to gold. But her intelligence reports were usually worth the price. Matthias went ahead and read the message aloud from her. Lorthamar spends his days at study, though I often observe him gazing listlessly at nothing, and scribbling something in the margin of his book. I managed to access one of his tomes when he left to dine. It appears he's either composing poetry or notes of a more intimate nature. Beside a passage about holy energy, he writes, "My dusk lily bends more each day towards the sun." Dusk lily? Is there more? Not about the flower, sadly. But she does describe an incident at the Horde Council meeting with the Zandalari Queen. Something of real substance. An assassination attempt by a troll. Somebody within the Horde wishes harm against Talanji. Could explain the storm. How so? Well, if somebody wants her dead, maybe she put the whole continent on lockdown. That is annoyingly reasonable. Why, thank you. This next one's from Krazit the Bishop. Krazit? I know Krazit. Spooky little fellow. Liked to gamble in Freehold. Called himself the Bishop because he'd get absolutely shit-faced and say, "Lads, I'm a bit slopped." But it would sound like, "Lads, I'm a bishop." I miss that guy. Lost my old parrot Bong Bong to him in a card game. Always wonder what happened to that bird. Great. Well, Kraz thinks the assassination attempt really gummed things up for the Horde. The Queen left in a huff. They've sent their own spies after her, a troll called Zakan. Interesting. They must not be as solidly loyal to the Horde as we thought. How did you get Krazit to turn and snitch for you? Parrots. A weird amount of parrots. Classic Krazit. Hang on, so the Queen nearly dies, and now the Horde don't trust her. They probably just sent a spy as a precaution. A soft nervous tap at the door interrupted their conversation, and then the Tide Sage, Melly, poked her head in. "Beg your pardon. There's another storm coming on. I wanted to talk to you about it." This weather ain't random, and it ain't no magic I know of. It's like they know where we are, like they sent these rages just for us. Sira Moonwarden was currently wading her way through mud and stuff in Nazmir, and she wasn't enjoying it very much. What a pit. A blessing that this post is only temporary. Beside her was Nathanos Blightcaller, standing very still and ignoring the cloud of flies gathering around his head. Where are they? Patience, Warden. Patience. Even on a good day, Sira didn't have a lot of patience. Life roared at her from every direction here in the Frog Marsh. Crabs clicking, frogs ribbiting, and insects buzzing and shit. It was bloody audacious. It was bloody loathsome. We'll be eaten alive. There. Nathanos pointed towards some trees. Do you see them? Sira squinted, but to be honest, she couldn't see shit. They move like shadows along the forest floor. And being shadows, they will continue being very useful to us. Sira then noticed movement among the roots of the trees. Trolls cleverly smeared in mud, moving towards them, like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator. They were nearly invisible in the jumble of bushes and fallen logs. Well, they can come out of hiding. They called this meeting. I happen to agree. Nathanos then let out a sharp whistle, alerting the Zandalari rebels that he'd marked their presence. So they stood up, and their leader went ahead and limped the rest of the way with a small entourage. Sira actually didn't mind Apari. After all, they'd both been betrayed by the one thing that had always defined their lives. For Sira, it was her worship of the goddess Alun, and for Apari, it was her loyalty to the Zandalari crown. Greetings, Pale Rider. I realise it must have been difficult, given your limitations, but next time I expect promptness. I've no limitations you need to worry about. Indeed. At least you've understood our need for secrecy this time. The witch waved away his words impatiently. Have you bought our payment? You are hardly in a position to make demands, but I am eager to be out of this swamp. Nathanos then turned around and gestured Visrin forward, and the Dark Ranger stepped towards them with a small chest, silently placing it on the ground. Sira had seen what was inside the chest. Gems, jewellery, posh cutlery, flagons of rare booze, and daggers. It had seemed a bit excessive to the Warden, but Nathanos had told her that where they were going, none of these trifles would matter at all. Apari's bodyguard then knelt down and checked the contents of the chest, but she didn't smile, didn't say thanks or anything. She didn't seem to show any reaction at all. This is not what we want. This is not what we agreed upon. Nathanos then cleared his throat, prompting Visrin to step forward again, grab the chest, and take it away. Bit rude. Apari immediately fixed her piercing eyes upon Sira, and the Warden then suddenly felt a sensation of 1,000 spiders skittering down her back, which did make her shiver a bit, but she refused to break eye contact with the witch because she ain't no coward. Now, this is a simple misunderstanding. What would you have from us instead? Apari then smiled and hobbled forward. Your messenger said you want to kill Aloa. You want to kill one Samdi, but you can't. Not without us. It is no easy thing what you ask. He must be weakened first. Believers in tribute keep him strong, but without faithful followers he'll be vulnerable. His shrines be protected by powerful magic. The tribute I need from you will dispel that magic. Get to the point. It will require something precious. Apari then pointed towards Visrin and the chest of gems and posh cutlery. That might be precious to some, but not to you. You must give up something painful, something irreplaceable. You are not in a position to bargain. With a theatrical sigh, Apari turned around and began rounding up the members of the Widow's Bite. At first, Sira was pretty sure it was just a bluff, but the trolls genuinely regrouped and started to disappear back into the dense foliage of the swamp. A moment. The trolls paused and Apari waited, offering only a glance over her right shoulder. But before Nathanos could relent and submit to them, Sira grabbed him by the elbow. Wait. But Nathanos had already started to pull a chain out from under his heavy black coat. A necklace with a green and gold badge. An officer's badge. A remnant from a war long since forgotten. What are you doing? We can't simply give in to every demand and roll over like trained dogs. They'll think you weak. You will learn the value of silence, or I will teach it to you. So, Sira stewed in indignant silence, and Nathanos removed the chain from his neck and walked over to Apari. This is no trinket, witch. If you fail to destroy the lowest shrines as promised, then there will be severe consequences. You may have conjured a few clouds off the coast, but payment this dear demands results. Apari threw her head back and laughed, and as she did, Sira noticed a shadow moving behind her. That'd always been there. So the Warden moved her hand to her side, tucked her fingers around her dagger, and prepared to strike. Oh, false alarm. This is what the spell requires. There be the power of longing in it, of pain, We assault the first shrine tonight. One Sandy's effigies will burn, and every loss hastens his final hour. And so, the meeting ended, and both parties went their separate ways. What was that? It doesn't matter now. It belonged to her, didn't it? Remind me when this is over to drown the witch in this bog. A rustling in the undergrowth made them both freeze, and then suddenly, a spear soared past them and into a bush. Abari's bodyguard Teo then appeared, casually walked over and tore the spear out of the undergrowth, to reveal a fat wet toad impaled at the end. Cragwar the Huge inhabits these swamps, and he'd be sympathetic to the traitor queen. His little spies are everywhere. Could be this one is just a toad, or he might be hopping about making mischief for us. Either way, lunch anyone? Back in Orgrimmar, Thrall was hanging about within his modest dwellings located in the Valley of Spirits. The other council members had chosen much more luxurious accommodations, but not this humble guy. There was a buttload of food on the table, near Thrall, but he'd kind of lost his appetite. Mainly because he'd received a message from Zakan. The assassins that had come after Queen Talanji at the council feast had struck again, and they were organised enough to have taken a name, the Widow's Bite, so that wasn't good. The shaman from the Maelstrom Yucca then entered and joined him. Are you going to eat that?
Did you come to steal my supper or do your job, Yucca?
Old friend, your missive reached Nordrasil and I carry your reply. The Night Warrior bids you come on one condition.
And? Spit it out.
She says you must bring what is owed. Thrall frowned. What the bloody hell was that supposed to mean?
What else did she say?
Nothing. She claimed you would know what that meant.
I see. And how does she seem?
Her rage hasn't lessened, if that's what you mean. Of course it hadn't. If someone had come along and burned his home down, Thrall would probably be pissed off for a while as well.
Very well. I can linger here no longer waiting for messengers and quelling council squabbles.
Thrall then abruptly yelled the word boy towards the door, and a skinny orc page quickly appeared.
Run to the hold quick as you can. Summon Kalia Menethil and Bane Bloodhoof. We depart for Nordrasil before sundown.
Right away.
The boy vanished, and Thrall walked over to a chest to collect his belongings. You sure it's wise to take the undead woman and High Chieftain with you? Will they not remind Tyrande of the Banshee Queen in their own ways?
Bane despises Sylvanas, and the feeling is mutual.
'Twas true. It was well known that Sylvanas considered Bane a soft liability, a snowflake, even before he tried to overthrow her. Thrall then stepped out of his little hut, with Yucca in tow. It was too bloody hot in this city, and the former war chief couldn't help but find himself wishing he was back in the Grand, chilling out in one of the many cool shaded pools near his farm. And Kalia?
Kalia Menethil wishes to bridge the divide between the Forsaken and the undead Kaldarai. I see no harm in it.
Yucca cringed, and Thrall noticed.
You disagree?
It would be better if you came alone.
Half the council is already convinced I'm going to get ambushed in Nordrasil. Some concessions have to be made. Go back inside and finish my supper if it bothers you so much.
Earthbinder, to go without me would indeed be your downfall. I've negotiated safe passage with the druids protecting the World Tree. I'm to escort you and your chosen companions.
Well, I feel safer already.
Tiala assured me that passage to the World Tree would remain safely open for us. I'm to guide you there and then to Tyranda's location. After that, you're on your own. Thrall then considered Tyranda's demand. You must bring what is owed. No doubt Tyrande Whisperwind and Malfurion Stormrage desired some gesture, some remuneration for the war crimes committed at Teldrassil. Even in the Grand, even cut off from his connection to the powers of a shaman, Thrall had felt the moment the world shifted. It was quiet, distant, but he heard the collective cry, tasted the smoke in the air. But what did he owe? He wasn't even there. Although innocence in one specific crime did feel like a bit of a weak shield. So, Thrall gazed all around at the great city of Orgrimmar and imagined it aflame, imagined it reduced to smouldering rubble. What would he need if such a thing were to happen? What possible gift could soothe a wound so impossibly deep? Sometime later, Thrall, Bane, Kalia and Yucca arrived in Mount Hyjal and observed the Great World Tree, Nordrasil. Oh, it's beautiful.
The crown of the heavens. What a gift, to walk in the shade of a world tree.
The light here is so different. The way it strikes the leaves. And the flowers. Have you ever seen blossoms of truer bloom?
It is truly a blessing from the Earthmo.
Although Kalia and Bane were obviously having a whale of a time acting like a bunch of hippies, Thrall did not feel quite so at ease.
There is a pall over this place.
We should move quickly. Come. Yucca then started to lead the way down the slope, and as the rest followed, Thrall had a brief word with his companions.
Take care with your words. Perhaps it is better now to listen. Chatter will not help heal old wounds. Do you sense the darkness that hangs over this place?
It's morning. I didn't realise at first. A bit distracted by the beauty of the World Tree. But the darkness, it's morning. We're trespassing on their grief. Thrall nodded, and was pleased that they both understood the gravity of the situation. Looked like he'd chosen his companions wisely.
I would not have come at all, but the spirit realm is fractured, and our shamans cannot find a cause.
Some more time later, the group reached the top of a hill, and found 4 figures waiting for them, 2 of which seemed very regal indeed. One of them was pretty obviously Malfurion, considering he had antlers and shit, the other regal figure being Tyrande, and the remaining 2 were Maiev Shadowsong and Chandris Feathermoon. Yucca then raised a hand, signalling the group to stop their advance, putting several feet between them and the Night Elves. As promised, Thrall, son of Juratan, Bane Bloodhoof, High Chieftain of the Tauren, and Kalia Menethil, Princess of Lordaeron and Counsellor of the Horde Forsaken. They have come to discuss the disturbances noted by the Earthen Ring and the Moonglade Druids.
Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Yucca and the others feel a sinister interference in the spirit realm. Our dead are not passing on as they should, and they are heedless of the shaman attempting to guide them.
And then there was awkward silence. The Night Elves didn't even blink.
Yucca tells me your priestesses have made similar discoveries. We have come seeking answers. Will you speak with us?
More silence. At his side, Thrall could sense Kalia shuffling nervously, but Thrall collected himself before saying anything rash. This was slightly insulting, but it was important to remember what had happened. Thrall then looked into Tyrande's eyes, into the hypnotizing aura of darkness, and saw pain, constant and potent.
I brought what you wanted. What is owed? I bring you the sincere apology of the Horde. We are no longer a single voice, spoken through the mouth of a war chief, but a whole host of voices. We formed a council, so that never again will one take power and abuse it as Sylvanas did, as Sylvanas used that power to slaughter your people.
Thrall could have sworn the moon above them glowed even brighter at the mention of the Banshee Queen's name, as if saying her name out loud had ignited its anger.
Kalia Menethil has come. She stands as an example of how we hope to change. Lillian Voss now speaks for the Forsaken. Both women seek to reforge themselves anew, free of Sylvanas' poisonous influence. Those who are sympathetic to the traitor have been exiled. Bane Bloodhoof even sought to overthrow Sylvanas and remove her as war chief. It is only a shame that he did not do so sooner, and that more did not listen.
And silence. It was like talking to a wall. A really angry wall. But, to his surprise, Chandris Feathermoon then broke the silence. You will understand our hesitation, Thrall. Even promises made by our own allies have been broken. I would hear more of what you have to say, but only because I crave justice as dearly as I crave healing for our people. Have a care, Chandris. Listen to his honeyed words at your peril. Believe him at your peril. Join the Horde to hunt Sylvanas at your peril. For once the deed is done, you will again find their daggers at your back. I believe justice is action, Maiev. I've told you as much before. Whose action? The Horde's? Whose action? What justice? Dunno about you, but I would not be content with only Sylvanas Windrunner receiving her due. She was not alone when Teldrassil burned.
Not all of the Horde stood with her that day.
And yet she spoke for your side. Acted for your side. But now you've scattered yourselves to a council, dispersing the blame. Hiding behind cowardly revisions of a history that will not be forgotten. I doubt you would like to be held accountable for every mistake and crime committed by the Alliance. Kalia Menethil then piped up. These disagreements are a distraction. Our divided sides only keep us from apprehending the one who gave the order. Maiev swiveled, waiting for Tyrande and Malfurion's reaction, but yet again, silence. So Chandris threw her 2 cents in instead. If we agree to a temporary understanding, then we do so not to exonerate the Horde entirely. I see no reason why this cannot be. I see many reasons. Tyrande then showed visible signs of frustration, and Thrall couldn't help but feel like the moon had just grown slightly bigger. But Malfurion leaned over and placed a hand on his wife's shoulder. It was not yet time. This was folly. Let them go. When you have washed the bodies of thousands, when you have fallen to your knees and kissed the feet of 1,000 mourning souls, when you look into their eyes and tell them our Horde has changed, and they believe you, only then will I accept your apology and treat you as my equal. My brethren here may be willing to entertain your empty pledges of justice and aid, but I know better. I have learned better. Elun's fury grew colder and brighter in Tyrande's skin with each word, and Thrall was genuinely worried the moon was about to fall out of the sky and crush them any minute. How many orphans did your Horde create that day? Those children will grow. They will wake each morning tasting ash, and one day they will come for you, and they will make you taste that same ash, and then you will know their justice. Yucca nudged Thrall and started muttering, "This was a mistake. I should not have brought you here. We should go." And so, Bane, Kalia and Yucca started to exit, but Thrall remained for a moment, causing Tyrande to direct her final words to him and only him. You will find that justice less sweet than the sorry excuse for punishment you faced. And when this justice comes, there will be no armistice to save you. Yucca grabbed Thrall's arm and yanked, but Thrall disagreed with the shaman's assessment. It was right that they'd come. It was important. Thrall had believed that what Tyrande wanted was the Horde's remorse, but now he'd realised his error.
I will bring what is owed then. I will not bring words or promises. I will bring you the head of Sylvanas Winra.
Tyrande then smiled the faintest of smiles. Do it then, or never seek to speak with me again. As venom dripped from fangs as thick and white as river beast tusks onto Talanji's shoulder, she screamed helplessly. She knew this was a nightmare. It was the same nightmare she'd had quite a few times recently, but knowing it wasn't real didn't make escaping it any easier. The creature looked an awful lot like Shadra. It had her pinned down with its 8 legs and there was nothing she could do about it. And then it opened its mouth wide. And inside the beast, Talanji could see the face of another person. The father of the girl that had petitioned her not so long ago. Bazine. News had reached Dazara Law of his demise to the Widow's Bite. Talanji's patrols had found his corpse at the edge of Nazmir, charred, almost beyond recognition.
Help me, my queen. Help me.
I can't. But despite not being able to do anything for Bazine, Talanji decided she wasn't going to simply lie down and die without a fight. So she scratched and clawed at the creature, and then remembered there was something much more useful she could do to bring an end to all this.
Bwonsamdi!
The image of Shadra faded, as did the nightmare around it, and Talanji woke up, gasping for air, and immediately leaping out of bed. You called?
It was only a nightmare. Shadra wanted me dead, and the poor father they stole from the palace was inside her. It felt so real.
Because your guilt is real. Take a look outside, my queen. Your nightmare is not over. Something must be done, and soon. Talanji hissed and walked off to the balcony's edge. She knew the Lower of Graves spoke true, but he didn't have to be a dick about it.
My soldiers patrol the jungle tirelessly, yet somehow they slip by. They raid my city, attack my palace, attack me. How did they grow so strong so quickly?
Bwonsamdi floated beside her and looked out over the jungle. Talanji had not been idle. She'd met with her council each day to discuss new approaches, new tactics. They had superior resources and the superior force, but it was their own land that worked against them. The Widow's Bite used the jungle to stay hidden. Their scattered numbers were an advantage against an army spread thin, and there were many out there that remained suspicious of her rule.
What do we do? How do I stop what I cannot see? They have no fortress, not even camps. They attack you because of the pact your father made. They think I control you, and they fear what my queen, the Queen of Death, might become. I am not your queen. Tell them that. They'd be burning my shrines, breaking the magic that protects them, killing my priests where they stand. If they burn many more, I won't be much help to you. The Lower is nothing without believers and prayers. It's harming you. You're growing weaker. And you. Me.
Talanji had noticed wrinkles where wrinkles had not previously been. Her hands looked particularly withered, or pruny, like she'd been in the bath too long.
What's happening to me, Bwonsamdi? We share a bond, little queen. We share a fate. If I have no followers, then I'll be all but gone. My strength weakens, yours weakens with it. Then these shivers, this pain in my chest, will only get worse, Talanji. Unless you protect me. You must protect me.
Talanji could hear actual fear in Bwonsamdi's voice, and she couldn't help but wonder how she was supposed to stand tall and courageous when even a god was afraid.
I can't accept this. Accept it or not, it is the truth. If true, then how do I fight these rebels? Can you not help me? You have soldiers, Talanji, and you could have many more. I think you already know how to fight these rebels.
The Horde. Of course. The Ambassador Zakan hadn't stopped pressing her to return to Orgrimmar and accept a place on the new Horde Council. But what would that achieve? She needed soldiers, not empty promises. But Talanji knew her stubbornness wouldn't put out fires either, and her own Zanchuli Council weren't exactly offering up any real solutions.
I will never accept peace with the Alliance, but I will ask for the Horde's help. This is growing beyond us. Good. An attack against me is an attack against you. If they destroy us both, who's going to protect Zandalot? This is no small thing you want from me. The Horde is working with the witch that killed my father. They are content to ignore the crimes of Jaina Proudmoore, but I will never be. So if you get what you want, Lower, I will not go empty-handed. Empty-handed? You get a kingdom in your life. I'd say that's more than fair. And I am rid of this bond between us, Bwonsamdi. Rastakhan's deal. I want it no longer. If I am to abandon my pride to the Horde, then you will abandon this pact.
'Twasn't often that Talanji gave an ultimatum like this, and her heart was kind of racing a little bit, especially at the sight of the grimace forming on Bwonsamdi's face. But she wasn't going to back down from him. If there was ever a moment for her to be free from him, this was it.
I don't think so, little queen. Why? Can it not be undone, our pact? Will it kill me to break it? No, Talanji, but you would regret it. You have the Lower of Graves on your side, the loyalty of a god. Did you really think there would be no drawbacks?
The room then grew frosty and fogged, and a blast of energy then sent Talanji toppling into a wall as Bwonsamdi gathered what little strength he had. But Talanji looked him dead in the eyes. She didn't cower, and she remained silent. Let him have his tantrum. She had the high ground.
Reckless child of a reckless king. Consider yourself lucky you'd be working with me and not another Lower.
Mu'atzala would eat you alive.
I would tell him the same thing. You will regret this. Consider the deal struck, Gil. Protect my shrines, and when I'm strong again, our pact will be no more. You'll have your life back, all your own. But you may not like what it means to be all alone.
The following morning, Zakan was feeling pretty anxious as he stood in front of the Zanchuli Council. They'd called an emergency meeting to address the growing threat of the Widow's Bite, and Zakan was feeling the pressure, because these were all really important people, and he was just a random bloke. The solution was pretty simple though, as far as he was concerned. Talanji needed help from the Horde, and the Horde wanted to give it. All Zakan had to do was convince her that the safety and security of Zandalar was much more important than her personal vendettas. Although that might be easier said than done, or it might not be, considering what happened in the last chapter. The Widow's Bite would have us believe they are everywhere and nowhere, but this is not true. Now we know what they want, to weaken Bwonsamdi because they believe it will weaken me. They will continue to target places of Bwonsamdi's power, his shrines of course, and more importantly, the necropolis. It must not fall, but knowing where the rebels will strike means we can put a stop to this now. We protect the shrines, we protect the necropolis, and the Widow's Bite will be forced into open conflict. Zakan started to clap, but then realised he was the only one doing so, and he realised he wasn't actually supposed to be supporting her plan, but convincing her of his own. So he cleared his throat, and then took a step back further into the shadows because he was bloody terrified. Rokan, the chieftain of the Darkspear tribe, had arrived in Tazara Lord just before dawn. The brutal storm off the coast had forced him to use one of Gazlo's flying machines to make the journey, but even that had been dangerous. The contraption had literally exploded and crashed into the sea a few seconds after dropping him off. I agree with your assessment, Queen Talanji, but we best send those patrols now. Sentiment in the city is not good. These attacks make you look incompetent and weak. To Talanji's credit, she didn't flinch at that, even when Ward Druid Loti granted her agreement. The rebel threat ends today. Then let a force be assembled. The necropolis is vast, with many tunnels where little spiders might hide. It will take a great deal of resources to secure it. It was time. Zakan wasn't technically scheduled to speak until after Zalani, but he knew this was his one opportunity to convince, before they all got too enthusiastic and certain about this plan. If I may. And then there was silence. Zakan could have sworn he could hear a parrot flap its wings 6 miles away. Ah, Zakan. Come forward, boy. What do you have to say? Do we really have time for this? I can be brief. Don't send your soldiers to the necropolis. I mean, the Queen is right. Bwonsamdi must be protected, and all the people of Zandalar. But you can't do it alone. This is a Zandalari problem. I'm not unreasonable. I can bend. The Horde may send their soldiers, if and when they agree to lend me those same troops against the Proudmoors. They'll never agree to that. And what then? Your people think you're weak now. What will they think when you can't protect your own shrines and temples against a band of rebels? The atmosphere shifted in the room. Suddenly, the council seemed very interested in what Zakan had to say. You get one chance to write the ending of this story. So far, your people have only witnessed defeat. Can you stand to show them one more? Why take that chance? The Horde is willing to stand with you. With their strength, we can write a victorious ending right now. Talanji looked like she was about to punch Zakan right in the face, but she kept her temper. This is propaganda. The boy has a point. The only propaganda I be seeing is what the Widow's Bite spreads against us, my queen. That tide is turning, and without a decisive victory, those rebels could raise the whole city against you. If the Queen's rule is truly threatened, then inviting the Horde force back here could be a mistake. I mean no insult to you, Rakan, but what if your generals see an opportunity to invade? Lashk speaks wisdom. There are already rumours of such in the city. If the Horde is to come, then we must have certain promises in return. Justice for our city. Revenge for the Alliance siege. These rumours.
I have my doubts about these rebels. They'd be too fast, too smart. Maybe a lower be helping them. Or maybe something else. Like what? I don't know yet, boy. But I intend to find out. You won't have my support either way until we know more, Queen Talanji. The ambassador here be right. We only get one chance. Rakan then walked out of the council chamber and Talanji followed him, and then the rest of the council members. Guess the meeting was over then. Zakaran stared speechless as arguments erupted and everything fell into uproar. He tried to get a word in edgeways, but there was no use. And then they were all gone, and Zakaran stood on his lonesome, scratching his head trying to figure out what the bloody hell just happened. Thanks for listening. Ah, they heard you, boy. And you did well. No, I didn't. Talanji doesn't trust me. She won't trust the Horde, and we're running out of time. You knew it this. Don't be so hard on yourself, boy. Some of the council will be listening to you, and that's no small feat. They see something powerful in you. They see what I see. Zakaran kind of perked up a little bit at that. A lower, a god, thought he was doing a good job, and that he was powerful. That was nice. What do they see? Besides a failure. Someone they want on their side. Okay then. Maybe you're right. If the council can listen to me, then so can the Queen. I won't give up. There you go. Zakaran could hear a hint of sadness in Bwansamdi's voice, but that only strengthened his resolve. The lower needed protecting, and Zakaran would see it done.
Meanwhile, in the sea somewhere, Matthias Shaw was currently hanging about reading a book below deck, with his bezie, Flynn Fairwind, sat across the table from him. The sound of a flute was in the air, as well as a party atmosphere. The rest of the crew up above were having a whale of a time. You can join them, you know. Despite the not-so-subtle hint, Flynn remained where he was. Crew has less fun when Captain chaperones. They need time to relax and just be themselves. Don't you need that also? Everyone does. Except you. Do you ever stop working? Not really. Well, maybe you should try it. Fine. Matthias closed his book and stretched his arms over his head. I stopped working. What now? I don't know. What do you want to talk about? This was your idea. Over the course of the journey to Zandalar, Matthias had attempted to keep himself to himself in the captain's quarters, but Flynn had often joined him, ever inebriated. At first, the constant company had kinda annoyed the spymaster, but gradually, as he was prone to do, he built a profile of the strange and fascinating Flynn Fairwind. There was something about this man that was bloody intriguing. My mother was a thief, you know. I did not know. She was. Always insisted she was a barmaid, but one night I hid under the bed and waited for her. She must have thought I was out back playing, but no, I was watching. She went to a loose brick by the hearth and pried it up, and stuffed a few necklaces and brooches in there. Did she catch you? No. I waited till she went back out looking for me and popped up, crawled out the window, scrambled round a bush to make it seem like I'd been out there all along. For a while I was, I don't know, angry or sad. I wanted her to trust me. But then I realised any mother willing to do that for her son, risk her life and her liberty, must be full of love. Flynn grabbed his bottle and started to chug. So, where is she now? Your mother? She's dead. Hanged for being a thief. I think that was the day I stopped being a stupid little boy. I made myself go and watch. I remember the sound, most of all. Everyone but me seemed to know it was coming. There was a breath in, everyone all together, and then a crunch. I thought I'd hear her scream or cry out for me, but no, that was it. No little boy should know that sound. You've heard it before, I gather? Yeah, many times. And does it always make you feel sick? Always. Matthias knew they'd both possibly just killed the conversation, but he didn't want it to end. My grandmother was a thief too. Pardon? Suddenly, there was a frantic pounding at the door before it burst open. Captain, you need to see this. New plan. We land and we land fast, if we can land at all. Another unnatural storm had risen. The rain poured whilst the wind tore at the Boldava's sail viciously. Melly, if you're still aboard and alive, get us to shore. Flynn then crashed across the main deck, using anything he could to stay upright, hoping to find the Tide Sage, who was their only hope of surviving the storm. It was pointless yelling out to her. The wind was catching any voice and carrying it away. A seagull came out of nowhere and whipped him right in the face before rocketing out to sea, but eventually, finally, a door. So the captain threw himself through it. Sure! The spymaster emerged shouting something, but the sound was lost. They were basically standing nose to nose, but it was bloody impossible to make out a single word. What? I can't... What are you saying? The wind then changed direction, leaving a brief swirling vortex of quiet. Land! Flynn then felt his ship lurch and make a sound no captain ever wishes to hear. An ear-rending crunch. Land. Yeah, we noticed. As the captain crawled slowly to his feet, a little bit wobbly, the storm moved off as quickly as it had come on, and Melly stumbled down towards them, dazed and wide-eyed. Melly, you're fired. Wait, no, we still need a way off this damn island. Alright, you're back on the crew. For now. That storm was chasing us specifically. I'm no expert, sure, but I think it's safe to assume we're not dealing with ordinary weather phenomena. If we don't find a way to stop whatever magic is causing this, we'll be stuck here forever. That won't happen. Let's get to shore. Find a secluded spot to make camp. What about the footholds you lot put down here? Fort Victory or whatever? Abandoned. Once the armistice was signed, we ceded control of those encampments. Any sign of us here will be taken as an act of aggression. Oh, brilliant. Then I'm glad we shipwrecked with such cat-like subtlety. Marshlands to the north, river to the west. As Matthias looked at his map, Flynn simply observed his surroundings. There's a village to the south. That must be Zebahari. Shit. We should be much deeper into Nazmir. I wanted to avoid veering this close to the Troll City. Well, pardon me. I thought we had until the White Lady was full to get there. Silly me. Don't get defensive. Once the crew are back on their feet, we can follow the shore north and stay close to land to avoid the storms. A short, sharp whistle came from behind them, and Flynn glanced back to see one of the sailors hanging over a railing, looking glass in hand, pointing frantically towards the dense jungle. Shaw, look lively. Flynn then drew his sword, but Shaw calmly stuck his arm out, preventing the captain from charging into the jungle. They've spotted us. What are you waiting for? Spilling blood will only cause more attention. They aren't dressed in royal colours, and they're moving off. Probably just foragers. The spymaster then mumbled the words white and black to himself. You what, mate? Did you get a look at their garb? White and black, with some sort of design on it. Looked like a lot of arms and legs. Like a spider. Yeah, exactly like a spider. Let's have a look at this camp of theirs. Maybe they left something behind. Upon entering the camp, Shaw immediately noticed that they had indeed left some things behind. This is worrisome. Why? It's just arrows. Completely normal arrows. This fletching. I've seen modified fletching like this before. We're on the right track. Shaw then fished out some pieces of parchment that had been covered by the sand. It's pretty fortunate that these trolls had just left clues lying around on the ground. Take these. Put them in your pouch. What? Why me? Yours is drier. Just do it, Fairwind. I need to look around more. Get those back to ship and be careful. Alright. But only because you asked so sweetly. Flynn then left Shaw playing in the sand and made his way back over to the ship. Our cheerful master of ceremonies wants us back in the water quick as he please. A general groan came from the crew. Now. We won't weigh anchor far from here, and then you can eat as much cod and chug as much grog as you like. We've survived the worst bits, lads and ladies, so pull up your bloomers and let's hop to it. Melly, can you, I don't know, tide sage us out of here? Aye, sir. Tide's going out and the waves are nice and gentle. Excellent. See? Good news. Fortune doesn't favour the bold, it favours the patient. Now finally, Flynn could try and grab some much needed shut-eye, considering he hadn't slept for several days. Captain, in the trees! Ah, balls. Naylor immediately tried to yell a warning towards Matthias, but 'twas too late. The man appeared to be facing impossible odds. Nobody could stand alone against that many enemies. And the trolls charging him were not the white and black clad ones they'd seen before. These ones were shrouded in intricate golden armour. Royal Guards. Bollocks. They'd been made. Flynn watched, heart pounding, as Shaw lifted his daggers, and then carefully placed them down in the sand. Surrendering. This wasn't right. That was their man down there, and Flynn didn't care how many trolls he had to fire on to save him. So he lifted his hand, ready to give the order, but Shaw then abruptly turned towards the ship and mouthed something towards them. Run. Do we fire, sir? No. Get us out of here, Melly. But Shaw knows what he's doing. We have to trust him on that. We have to trust our own. The Zandalari arrow then struck the deck with more falling immediately after. So Melly closed her eyes, thrust her hands out and used her Tide Sage magic. And the Boldava went bloody whoosh or something. But Fairwind felt awful. The only man he'd ever told about his mother, who'd listened and knew exactly when to give that little wince of solidarity. A man that Flynn had grown to trust completely. And they were leaving him behind. Meanwhile, in Tiragard Sound, Jaina had hosted some pretty shit dinner parties in her day, but this one was swiftly becoming the worst. The servants had brought out course after course: blood sausage, roasted peppers on toast, wild boar pie, probably some palate-cleansing sorbets, maybe a bit of pheasant cooked in cider, a Ferrero Rocher, champagne and caviar, lobster bisque. Should I just do this for 5 minutes? List posh things? That'll make the video longer. Although Lord Commander Turallion was wolfing it all down like he hadn't eaten in weeks, Illyria wasn't touching her food at all. I hear Hackney has whipped up a scrumptious ravenberry tart for dessert. Jaina couldn't help but admire her mother's tenacity. She had the most uncanny ability to weather even the most awkward supper like an absolute champ. That's very thoughtful, but I fear it would be impossible for me to partake. I couldn't possibly eat another bite. Jaina caught herself glaring at Illyria Windrunner. Bloody liar. She hadn't eaten anything. The Grand Admiral had once held nothing but pure admiration for this elven ranger, but now, infested with the void, Jaina held her actions and her words to a much higher level of scrutiny. Was it even Illyria who had just spoken? Or some twisted monstrosity from the void? One that's first step towards world domination was to not eat the food at a dinner party or something? Well, I think more wine would suit us all, wouldn't it? Yes, much more wine. Suddenly, the double doors leading into the dining room flew open and a guard barged in, panting, accompanied by none other than Flynn Fairwind, who was also panting. Jesus. Oh my God. By wind and by sea, speak, Cormory. What's the matter with you? They took him. They took who? We sailed as fast as we could, back through the storm. Melly damn near killed herself, but she said this was the best port to take us. What is going on? Calm down, catch your breath, and tell us exactly what happened. Who is gone? It's sure. The Zandalari trolls caught us. Flynn then pulled at a satchel on his belt, unhooked it, and spilled the contents across the dinner table. And Turallion picked up one of the items immediately. This arrow. I've seen these before. These are the arrows we found in Shaw's spies. It's okay, Flynn. Matthias Shaw is a high-ranking member of the Alliance forces. Queen Talanji will not execute him without cause. Illyria then picked up some interesting-looking bits of parchment from the table. I somewhat doubt that trolls would communicate with one another in Thalassian. This is valuable evidence. Proof that the Dark Rangers are indeed infiltrating Zandalar. There's troop movements, patrol routes. Nothing that might tell us what they want on the island, but still proof enough that the Dark Rangers are there. We should have acted sooner. Sylvanas could be in Zoldazar right now conspiring with the trolls. Jaina sensed that this conversation was escalating quickly. Yes, she wanted to find Sylvanas. Yes, these clues should be taken into consideration. But she could hear the far-off drums of war echoing in Turallion's voice. And it would be quite nice, if just once, there wasn't a bloody war. Anduin had already sent Valera's Sanguinar to Bane Bloodhoof to ask whether Sylvanas may have been spotted in Zandalari lands, and the response had been swift and certain. Nope. Perhaps it had been naive of Anduin to believe that, but Jaina knew Bane well too. There was no reason for him to lie. He wanted Sylvanas captured and tried as much as they did. I will take these missives to the king. He must be informed at once and a new strategy approved. If the Horde is harbouring Sylvanas on Zandalar, then we must be quick and quiet. The cunning blade never seen and only later felt. No. Even Fairwind fell silent at Jaina's abrupt no. The whole room stilled, as Illyria gazed into Jaina's eyes with what can only be described as disdain. You disagree that time is of the essence? The time for action is now, Jaina. Illyria then began to glow that purpley voidy glow, and Catherine Proudmoore audibly gasped, causing Jaina to very nearly lose her temper. She wanted nothing more than to teleport Illyria to the very top of Mount Neverest, but she did not. I disagree with your conclusion. Think, Illyria. Shaw and Fairwind were already seen by the Zandalari, so we can assume they were also identified. Zandalar will be expecting more Alliance soldiers on their doorstep. Do not reward their paranoia. Do not add fuel to an already kindling fire. I beg of you, do not risk the treaty we worked so hard to achieve. Then what do you suggest? As he said it, Turallion did place a hand over his wife's and give it a tight squeeze, just in case anyone thinks he's being a bit of a shit husband at the moment. That we put our trust in the very same treaty. All I beg of you is time. Time to let me try this one last thing. If this fails, then perhaps you're right, Illyria. Perhaps then we must become the Blade. The moment Thrall stepped foot back in Orgrimmar, G. Firepaw excitedly ran up to him and handed him a message. The Pandaren looked genuinely pleased that he actually got to do something in his story rather than just stand in the background.
I was only gone for 2 days. Clearly I missed something.
Forgive me for ambushing you this early after your return, Thrall, but I believe the urgency demanded your attention.
They both then stepped on the elevator that would take them down to ground level and only a hop, skip and a jump away from Grommash Hold.
Well, what do you make of it?
I can't say it's surprising.
The message was an invitation to meet with the King of Stormwind, but written in Jaina's distinctive handwriting. Seemed like a pretty brazen attempt to manipulate him, but Thrall didn't hold that against them or her. If he needed a favour from the Alliance, he would probably have done exactly the same thing. Got Bane to put a hoof print on a piece of paper or something. Jaina had started the message appropriately. Polite greetings to the Council as a whole, but one section in particular was just for Thrall, and was a little bit emotional blackmail. If you ever valued our friendship, please meet with King Anduin and myself. I share with you now Alliance intelligence in the hope that you will see it not only as a gesture of goodwill, but as a call to action.
I had hoped to resolve the unrest in Zandalar before the Alliance could learn of it, but this can't be ignored.
Can I come?
You.
This letter was addressed to us all. Besides, when lightning strikes the wrong tree, the whole forest burns. Zandalar is the tree, these dark rumours are the lightning. Perhaps a monk's wisdom might stem the blaze.
These negotiations will require a delicate touch, G, and your wisdom generally involves acting as swiftly as possible. But then I suppose going at all would be action. You know, agreeing to this might be unpopular with the rest of the council.
Yeah, but popular or not, the Horde's previous rogue war chief almost cost my people the soul of their homeland. So you will of course forgive my insistence. The veil of eternal blossoms is nearly healed, but the Pandaren will forever wear the scars of Hellscream's cruelty.
Thrall glanced down at the Pandaren monk and found a familiar tenacity in his eyes. It was the very same pain and determination he'd observed in the eyes of Tyrande Whisperwind.
Woes upon woes. Trouble heaped upon trouble.
You what, mate?
The reports from our ambassador in Zandalar are bleak, G. The Queen is being overrun by rebels, and now the Alliance wishes to confer with us. I can't help but think all these things are connected.
The two then arrived outside Grommash Hold and heard the raised voices drifting out from within.
We should go in.
Well, yeah. Otherwise we just walked here for no reason. At last. There you are. Where are Bane and Kalia? What do you make of this request from the Alliance?
Bane and Kalia will be here soon to describe our meeting with the Night Elves.
Thrall then tugged the Alliance message from his belt and mentally prepared himself for the inevitable argument that was about to ensue. But G. Firepaw then piped up. As for the message, we will go. The word from Zandalar is dire. We know this, and now the Alliance knows it. It's our duty to act. If we ignore their summons, then why did we sign a treaty in the first place? Thank God for that. Thrall was pretty grateful to G for taking the arrow. The last thing Thrall wanted was to appear more like a war chief, and less like a single equal member of the council. But that didn't stop Thalyssera from immediately making him feel like a war chief rather than a single equal member of the council. Thrall, what are your thoughts?
G is right. I had hoped to put out the fires in Zandalar before the Alliance noticed, but it appears the conflict has grown too obvious to hide.
But Dark Rangers? Sounds far-fetched, does it not? Sounds to me like they got their man arrested for trespassing and now they want our help freeing him. They're abusing our civility.
Thrall hadn't actually considered that.
I have no intention of freeing their spy. I go to protect Zandalar. If the Alliance decides Dark Rangers are working with Queen Talanji, then they will start another war.
But how could they think that? We've not been kind to Sylvanas loyalists.
We know that, but the Alliance doesn't. What must our turmoil look like to them? So I will go, and I will listen.
Listen? Sounds boring. How about you tell them to stay off our lands? Last time I checked, a treaty isn't just a bunch of gentle suggestions. Better yet, tell them they can have their spy back if they give us something first. They will give us something. Knowledge. Whatever we learn, we can use to protect Zandalar. In truth, I do want to know more of these Dark Rangers. If by chance Sylvanas truly is in Zandalar, then we could have her in our snare tomorrow. Do it. Any chance we get to capture the Banshee Queen cannot be wasted. While many of us left Zandalar, it is still our home. If it is sick with treachery, I would see it healed. Seemed like only Gazlo remained unsure, and although his single nay couldn't overrule a decision, Thrall still felt it important to reach a consensus. So he just kind of stared at the goblin. Fine, what the hell. Just capture Sylvanas so we can all shut up about her already. So, Thalyssera opened a portal. She wasn't wasting any time, but it seemed like the Alliance were wasting some time. Thrall didn't like being kept waiting, and G liked it even less. It felt like they'd been stood on this bobbing wreck floating in the waters between the Eastern Kingdoms and Zandalar for bloody ages. Quite the storm.
Yet it isn't moving. Storms move. That looks more like a wall to me.
Perhaps we should be glad. This old Hulk wouldn't survive a sun shower, let alone whatever that is. Just add it to the list.
The list?
of curiosities and coincidences that must be explained. Links that make up a chain we cannot yet see the end of.
A mage's portal then pulled at the air around them before splitting open with a crack. G immediately entered his fighting stance, but Thrall remained calm. Just as Jaina had promised, only 2 had come.
No ambush. Shame. It's a damn good place for one.
I'm full of surprises today, Thrall, but not that kind. Thank you for coming.
As Thrall examined the King of Stormwind, he noted a few things. Firstly, Anduin did not seem quite so at ease on the ship as Jaina did. His initial steps out of the portal were a bit wobbly. Secondly, he had that tired, sleepless look to him. The ravages of leadership. Thrall knew that all too well.
G. Firepaw, Lord Admiral, Your Majesty, disappointing that we meet under such unhappy circumstances. Unhappy isn't the half of it.
There is something you should know. If there are to be no great secrets between us, then I should tell you that I met with Tyrande and Malfurion.
Oh?
It, didn't go so well. I tried to put forward an apology from the Horde, but they didn't accept it. They're only interested in revenge against Windrunner.
That is also foremost on our minds. Let's cut to the chase, shall we?
Jaina then reached into a leather satchel and pulled out an arrow that looked to be of Zandalari make and colour, as well as several scraps of parchment.
We intercepted members of the Horde aiding a Dark Ranger called Visrin. He took passage from Faldir's Cove to Zandalar, warning of the storms you now see on the horizon, which speaks to organisation, a plan. My spy master and Lord Commander Turallion are also confident the arrow you hold was fletched by Dark Rangers. It appears quite different from the fletching you see on the average Zandalari arrow. We have many left over from the war, for comparison.
Sassy bitch. Thrall had been perusing the notes, but shifted his gaze to the king at that last bit. The messages say,
I can read them.
But reading them filled Thrall's heart with dread. This was bad. Bad for the Horde, but worse for Talanji. There was no mistaking the script, the language, the content. Dark Rangers had definitely written these notes.
Are you betraying us?
The words lingered in the air for an agonising moment before the king went ahead and doubled down.
Is Sylvanas Windrunner seeking refuge on Zandalar? I've come for answers, Thrall, and I will have them.
G. Firepaw straightened and looked a little bit outraged.
There's no love left for Sylvanas Windrunner among our Horde. Only hatred. No conspiracy exists to shelter her. Bane Bloodhoof would not abide such a gutless plot, and neither would I. Rebels have been assaulting the palace in Tazaralol, attempting to assassinate the Queen, and are now burning down lower shrines all over Zoldazar and Nazmir. Our council does nothing, and the Queen refuses to set aside old vendettas to ask for our help.
The briefest flicker of relief passed across Anduin's face.
Why?
Why what?
Why won't she ask for your help? She agreed to join the Horde ages ago.
You know why.
Oh, I see.
Anduin then turned to Jaina and started acting like Thrall and G weren't right in front of them anymore.
Are we to believe them? Yes. Yeah, I think we are. What he says is true. Bane would rather die than be a part of some plan to hide and help Sylvanas. We must find these Dark Rangers and make sense of their being on Zandalar. Whatever the reason, it can't be good. It appears the lightning has already struck.
Thrall shut his eyes tight. The Pandaran's metaphor was pretty accurate, but all was not lost yet. They still had Zakan embedded with the Queen, and they now knew better what they were facing. But what did Talanji possess that the Dark Rangers or Sylvanas might want? Thrall then stuffed the evidence into his own pack without asking. Anduin raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The Alliance had no doubt already made copies anyway.
I will go to Tazaralor myself. We've tried the careful approach. Now it's time for the hammer and fist.
There is also the matter of our spy master. Although he did trespass on Zandalari's shores, he was not there without cause. His mission brought us these clues. We are of course willing to use all accepted diplomatic channels to recover him. We only ask that he is not harmed until order is restored to the throne of Zandalar. The Alliance recognises this was badly done. We should have brought our suspicions to you directly, and not sought to position our spies in your territory. That is well spoken, Your Majesty, and the Horde Council can assure you that we do not execute prisoners without a trial.
Anduin then narrowed his eyes.
We would like to have him returned. Soon.
Give me 2 days. I will see about your spy, and I will take these matters to the Queen herself. Just as you said, King Anduin. There will be answers.
If we survive to see the next 2 days. G had turned back towards Zandalar and noticed that the storm shrouding it had now decided it would move. Angry clouds raced towards them, and Thrall couldn't quite believe the size of the waves gathering.
That storm nearly killed Fairwind 3 times. A portal, Jaina. Quickly.
2 days. Do not invade before then.
You'll have your 2 days, Thrall, but we cannot afford to lose the Banshee Queen's trail. Jaina had already begun channeling her magic to whisk herself and the king away to safety, but luckily she turned back to see Thrall and G looking at her, like, are you seriously just going to piss off and leave us here? Where?
The shore. The Zara Law.
So, she opened another portal for them, and Thrall grabbed G and immediately jumped through it. Apari was currently sat on the cliffs of Zebahari, thinking about and remembering all sorts of stuff. Mainly the fact that she hated kids. She'd never wanted children, so she wasn't that bothered about the fact that she couldn't have children. Not since the accident. Not since a pillar fell and crushed the lower half of her body, pulverising the bones in her leg, because that's where babies come from. Legs. Apari then recalled a conversation she'd had with her childhood friend many years ago. She and Talanji were only 8 years old, watching as new mothers brought their babies to the gardens of the Great Seal, to bless them in the pools that were said to be formed from Razan's own tears. All they do is cry and shit themselves. But father says it's a queen's duty to continue the line. Ugh. When you are queen, you can make your own rules, and you will be there with me. Nobody will tell us what to do. And Apari had believed her. She'd always believed Talanji. She'd believed her when Rastakhan's own advisors turned on him. She believed her when she'd said the Horde could be trusted. Even believed her over her own mother, Yasma. Lower are meant to be used, Apari. Manipulated. They care not for our lives, just as Rastakhan cares nothing for his subjects. But Shadra has never hurt us. Can't we trust her? You've been her priestess all these years. We trust poison, my daughter. We trust information and cunning. Shadra may possess these things, but she is a lower. When given the opportunity, Shadra will always choose what serves her best. And I will do the same. Put your faith in your own hands, Apari. A god is nothing without believers. And we do not have to submit to them, just as we will not submit to a crown that enslaves us to a lower's whims. The very next day after that conversation, Yasma had helped set in motion a coup that nearly toppled the king's rule, and then fallen in battle. If only Apari had listened to her mother. If only she'd seen Talanji and her father for who they truly were. If only she'd gone with her mother that day. Things might have turned out differently, and that regret festered as viciously as the wounds in her leg. Apari's Lieutenant Teo then approached, looking a bit sheepish. They disappeared. How? The they that Teo was referring to were an orc, a panda, some human bloke, and a woman that most Zandalari people would recognise immediately. Jaina Proudmoore, the lady that killed King Rastakhan. Teo had spotted them completely by chance, hanging about on an abandoned ship safely beyond the squall that raged off the Zandalari coast. And Apari had then commanded said squall in an attempt to engulf them and bloody murder the jerks. Now you'd think that Apari would actually kinda appreciate Jaina Proudmoore. After all, she'd succeeded where Yasma had failed. But there was another interesting connection between them that made Apari absolutely bloody hate the bitch. It was during an attack from Kultiran's ships on Zoldazar many years ago that had caused the pillar to collapse on her leg and cause all of these bloody problems for her. So basically, Apari wanted Jaina dead just as much as Talanji did. Apari, more shrines remain. We told the Pale Rider they'd all be burned by sundown. You'll have another chance to kill the Proudmoore woman one day. No, Teo, I won't. I don't have much longer to live. Only enough time to see the traitor queen brought low. That Volpira still be willing to take the leg and save you. Apari glared at Teo, but stopped herself from full-on lashing out and slapping her in the face. No, and we won't speak of it again. One more word and I'll toss you off this cliff. A slight flicker of anger or resentment crossed the troll's face, but Teo said nothing. Simply bowed her head and walked off back towards the rest of the Widow's Bite followers. Apari did have every intention of finishing the task the Pale Rider had set them, though. She wrapped her hand around the badge hanging from her neck, the old tarnished trinket that Nathanos Blightcaller had offered as his sacrifice. It thrummed with a strange cold power, and then she turned to face her followers. Widow's Bite, hear me now. The evening comes. Our swiftest runners to the city, our fiercest warriors with me to the Northern Shrine. No rest and no hesitation. One Samdi's pain will be ours tonight. Take it, and let it sustain you. It'll be a long climb. I should get started. The great city of the Zandalar Trolls rose like a golden promise before Thrall and G. Firepaw. It was going to be a right ball ache climbing all those stairs.
She could have dropped us closer.
Any competent queen would have spies littered all over her city. She will know of our coming before we even reach the terrace of the speakers.
Then she will be warned.
Thrall didn't exactly feel confident that the upcoming conversation was going to make any difference whatsoever. If this story has taught us anything, it's that Talanji is proud. Too proud. But they went ahead and began the long journey up the steps towards the palace anyway. Might as well.
When we reach the bazaar, we can hire a beast to make our journey shorter.
If we reach the bazaar. We're being followed. Trolls. 6 of them.
Thrall took his time, subtly picking out the trolls G had described in the crowd, and considered their odds. Their pursuers looked thin, underfed, but there was an intensity in their eyes. Sometimes the starved and the desperate are the most difficult opponents. As the two proceeded further up the steps, the crowds grew thinner, until eventually they reached an immense gilded pterodax perched atop an archway thingamabob. Only a few stragglers were hanging about in her shadow, but Thrall figured that as long as they remained out in the open, they would be okay. And he was wrong. Suddenly, a lanky troll darted towards him. Thrall anticipated the blow, grabbed the attacker's spear and used his own momentum against him. And G did a bunch of kung fu or something. Death to the traitor queen and her horde allies. A few more attackers appeared, but Thrall and G made quick work of them. But, despite being over pretty quickly, the fight had drawn a bit of an audience. Step aside, I said. Darkspear Chieftain Rokan pushed his way through the crowd. Thrall, didn't expect to see you here, and certainly not starting a fight.
Ambushers. Rebels. We've come to speak with the Queen.
Take the pterodax. I'll deal with this rabble. So, Thrall nodded, grabbed G and hoisted them both onto the beast's back, and off they went, soaring towards the Great Seal. Who has come? Why was I not warned of visitors to my throne? Queen Talanji had been somewhat ready for them. Word had carried of the ambush and bloodshed in the Grand Bazaar, obviously arriving quicker than even Thrall and G could. She hid it well, but her body growing weaker by the moment, just as one Sandy was.
Did you know of this? What? No, Majesty. No, I would have told you.
I apologize for the intrusion.
You will explain the intrusion. Now.
A new threat rises, Queen Talanji. We have come to offer our guidance and our aid.
The rebels, yeah. Just like I said, Your Majesty. The Horde be willing to help. I am the Queen, and I speak for the Golden Throne. So, Zakan, shut the up. This is not my first brush with insurrection.
The Rastari honor guards protecting the chamber inched closer to Thrall, as if sensing Talanji's growing irritation.
Like the traitors Yasma and Zul, this rebellion will be crushed, and order returned to Zoldazar. This is Zandalari business, and it will be handled the Zandalari way.
G then plucked a stray poisoned dart that had managed to get stuck in Thrall's furry shoulder thing. Indeed, it looks very handled. How dare you!
We don't have time for this. We work together or these rebels win the day, and topple your rule, Your Majesty. Listen, and listen well. Our shamans sense terrible unrest in the spirit realm. These rebels attacking you grow stronger, bolstered by the dark ranges of Sylvanas Windrunner.
And then there was silence. Talanji's heart clenched in her chest.
Dark ranges? Here? That's not possible. I would know of this.
No, you wouldn't. Sylvanas works in the shadows. Her forces are minimal. They use whatever resources they can, whatever reinforcements they can.
Even though it was a frightening revelation, it did explain some things. The Widow's Bite seemed to be everywhere and nowhere, and they'd somehow managed to get hold of new weapons, new tactics. A blight had landed on these shores and begun to infect the most persuadable. Sylvanas Windrunner was a name synonymous with chaos and death. And what was it the Widow's Bite were attacking? Shrines, belonging to the Lower of Graves.
Oh, there is proof of this, I assume?
Your reaction is proof enough. But there is more. My sources tell me that you have taken an Alliance spy into custody. He was investigating these exact suspicions.
Talanji really wanted to grab the throne for support, but instead forced herself to remain standing. They had indeed discovered an Alliance dog sniffing about, and her jailers had reported that he'd insisted on meeting with her, but she hadn't bothered.
These are grave tidings indeed. These signs. I should have seen them.
This is how Sylvanas works. They would have infiltrated carefully. They would have used all possible means to stay hidden. We're not blaming you for their presence, Queen Talanji. Only demanding that you take it seriously.
I will. I do. We can delay no longer. Dispatch our forces to the remaining shrines. The people of Zandalar cannot accuse us of turning on our own, not when the rebels have chosen such vile traitors for friends. Right away, my queen. I can go too. Lead some soldiers, I mean. I serve the Horde, my queen, but I serve you too.
You should wait for our forces to support your own. Dark Rangers are formidable.
My soldiers are formidable too. Summon your Horde forces, Thrall. Bring them to our aid. But Zandalar can wait no longer. Zandalar acts now.
Matthias Shaw looked around at the walls of his cell. He had to hand it to the Zandalari. Even the dungeons in the City of Gold lived up to the name. But a golden prison was still a prison. It was still bloody boring, no matter how shiny and valuable the walls were. All Shaw had been able to do during his captivity was lie back on the rock-hard bench they'd given him for a bed and stare up at the cracks in the ceiling and count them, over and over again. At least Fairwind and his crew had managed to escape, so that was cool. There was still the matter of whether or not they'd managed to make it back through the deadly impassable storm, with a notoriously unreliable pirate at the helm, but 'twas not the worst odds Shaw had ever seen. Now there was just the matter of getting out of here. The Zandalari had treated him well enough, given him a bench for rest, slop for food, a bucket for toilet. They'd very wisely put him in a cell at the very end of the prison, meaning there were 24 cells in total between him and an exit. Plus, 2 sentries were always posted outside his tiny golden room. However, the current guards watching him looked a little bit wet behind the ears. Inexperienced, which was a bit weird. You'd think a spy master would warrant the best of the best of the best. This your first stint guarding the prison? The younger of the 2 trolls shifted from foot to foot and glanced to his mate. Don't look at him, look at me. The troll then muttered something, but Matthias didn't quite catch it. You two not even a little bit curious about me? I don't bite, you know. We're not to talk to you. Says who? Overseer. Everyone. Just shut up. Shaw was pretty accustomed to this sort of thing, and he knew that any further probing for the time being would do more harm than good. So he left it at that. But a few days later, those same green guards returned for another shift. Bit boring down here, innit? I was going to take a vacation soon. Guess this is it now. Not really what I had in mind. Still silence from the guards. Thought I might disappear into the Highlands. Got a cabin out there. Small. What you might call cosy. Yeah, just get up when I wake up. Go to bed when I feel like it. Work on my bird calls. It's nice. Whole thing sounds a bit lonely though, doesn't it? The younger of the 2 trolls nodded, forgetting himself. Yep, I'm good at that. Being alone comes natural to me. I was never that personable. I like watching people, observing, but I don't like being part of it, you know? But I suppose I should find a friend. Shaw then stopped, realising he'd accidentally stumbled into a truth without meaning to. And it was at that moment that he decided if or when he got out of here, one of the first things he was going to do was have a very private and personal conversation with a recently made acquaintance, and tell him how he really felt. He could just imagine it. Conditions would be perfect. They'd be on a mountain or something, and he'd start by being all like, I never got to finish telling you about my grandmother. And Flynn would say something flippant like, I thought you just wanted to watch the sunset. And Shaw would sigh and snap off a piece of grass and play with it. Not nervously though, in a sexy way. Pathonia Shaw. Pathonia? What a name. Full apologies to your granny. She's long dead, and it would take more than a cheap insult to bring on her fury. She was made of iron, caught 3 times for stealing, and given the choice by the guard of Stormwind. Work for them, or hang. Safe to assume she chose Stormwind. Yep, she chose Stormwind. She chose to assassinate whomever they told her to and make it look like an accident. She taught my mother the same trade, and when my mother died, Sonia taught me. You see, she didn't just choose Stormwind for herself. She chose Stormwind for me too. Bitterness broke the scene for Shaw, and he opened his eyes to see no sunset, no green grass, no Flynn beside him. How different would Shaw's life have been had he been given the choice to choose for himself? Did Flynn Fairwind feel the same? Doomed to a life of piracy and theft because his mother had put him on that path? Shaw then leaned against the cold gold wall and thought some more about freedom, about how much he'd felt it aboard the Bold Ava, and alongside the man that was there with him, a man that smelled like whiskey and salt and soap. The very next day, the smaller of the 2 troll guards slipped something under the cell door, a long wide piece of grass. Confused, Matthias picked it up and studied it. It wasn't much of a digging instrument, or a shiv, but then he remembered all that junk he'd spilled to the guards the previous day, and smiled. It was for his vacation, for the bird calls, so that was nice. Looked like Shaw had indeed made a friend. But screw that guy, he ain't no Flynn Fairwind. Meanwhile, in Nazmir, Zakan, a lieutenant called Juho, and a whole bunch of soldiers were crouching all stealthy-like, observing the rebels that had unfortunately already reached Bwansamdi's next shrine. Too many. With those torches they can control the tar pits. We can't get near them. We have to try. The Queen needs us, Juho. Zandalar needs us. This is just for Bwansamdi. No, Juho. It's more than that. These rebels are stealing trolls from their beds, sacrificing them for dark magics. Do you not want to stop that? Zakan's words seemed to somewhat embolden Juho. To the west then. Fewer rebels that way. And so, Zakan, Juho and the soldiers began their approach. But as they drew nearer to their destination, Zakan noticed a large group of rebels clustered on the other side of the Tar Lakes, with dark rangers among them, and Nathanos Blightcaller himself. Before Zappy Boy could even register what he was seeing, Nathanos, the Dark Rangers and the rebels knocked lit fire arrows, ready to set the Tar and Bwansamdi's shrine aflame. And if that wasn't bad enough, something then squirmed on top of the shrine. Something alive. Ancestors have mercy. Children. Zandalari, now! The order was given, and the soldiers rushed forward, with spears raised. The soldiers did manage to cut through some rebels with relative ease, but the Dark Rangers proved much more formidable, just as Thrall had warned. It didn't take long at all before it looked very much like Talanji's troops were going to have to cheese it. But Zakan wasn't going to just leave those poor defenceless kids to die. A small gust of wind might push them to safety, or accidentally push them into the tar, but whatevs. So, the young shaman closed his eyes and started to channel his energy into a vortex. However, an arrow then landed right next to his feet, which kind of disrupted the spell. It was Nathanos Blightcaller that had fired it, and although he was pretty far away, and Zakan couldn't quite see his facial expression, he could absolutely guarantee that it was a smug grin. It was always a smug grin, the prick. More Dark Rangers then suddenly emerged from the shadows next to Zakan, which spooked him a little bit, so much so that he ended up falling into the tar. The Dark Rangers then holstered their daggers and drew bows instead, forcing Zakan to push himself further into the tar and away from them. Didn't really have a choice. But, as you can imagine, movement became harder and slower with every push, and the tar itself was desperately trying to drag Zakan down, not to mention the fact that tar is also extremely flammable. Turn back! Leave the children! They're lost! Bunch of jerks. The Dark Rangers continued to fire, and Nathanos Blightcaller turned and walked off at the languid pace of a completely unbothered man. But Zakan wasn't going to give up. He wasn't going to leave a bunch of stranded, frightened children to be shot down by heartless assholes, or burned alive. So he continued to push his way through the tar towards the shrine and the kids, despite the fact that it actually quite hurt to move. As soon as he was close enough, Zakan began to summon his power again, hoping the gust would be strong enough to hoist the children over to him, and it was. The children screamed like maniacs, but they were now safely atop his shoulders. Stop squirming! I'll get you to safety. But it wasn't over yet. The rebels were finally putting their torches to use, and fire was now raging towards Zakan and the children. The young shaman attempted to summon his wind spell for a third time, but nothing. Ancestors! What do I do? Much to Zakan's surprise, a voice actually responded to his semi-desperate call, but it definitely wasn't one of his ancestors.
You know what to do.
Zaofang? The bloody hell? But Zakan then realised he did indeed know what to do, now that he'd received validation from a dead person. So he went ahead and concentrated really hard, put all of his remaining might into another attempt at some magic wind, and sent the children flying off to safety. Talanji's soldiers rushed in to grab the little ones, and two of them stayed behind, grabbing a large dinosaur bone conveniently lying around on the ground, and thrusting it out across the tar towards Zakan. 'Twas a lifeline, but moving in the tar was almost impossible at this point. Hurt like hell. And just as Zakan reached the tip of the bone, he saw Talanji's soldiers' mouths drop in horror, felt the vicious kiss of the flames, and smelled his own hair burning. The pain was excruciating. He spasmed and saw his own skin blister as the trolls desperately tried to pull him to safety. And then the world fell away, and Zakan found himself plunging down. He'd expected death to be different, slower perhaps, more peaceful, but it had come on as quickly as one of his conjured whirlwinds. As he looked around, he saw other pale souls, and chains snaking up from the pit below, and those same chains then clamped over his shoulders and wrists, and dragged him down further. The void below him growled, shaking and rumbling, like a ravenous belly. Whatever was down there, Zakan definitely did not want to find out. Felt like something was watching him. An evil, too terrible to name. This was nothing like the sun-drenched reunion he'd witnessed through Saurfang's eyes. This was almost the exact opposite of that.
Some of the healers. We must attend to his burns at once.
The voice rippled on the fringes of Zakan's consciousness, and then more voices joined. Familiar voices.
How did this happen? The Dark Rangers, my queen. They were waiting for us. Damn it, where are those healers? You can do nothing for him, child. There's something I can do.
Zakan then felt something reach around his ankle and pull, hard, dragging him down further towards the nameless evil. But another force then started yanking him upwards. Not yet, my boy. Neither forces wanted to let go, and for a moment, Zakan felt like he was going to get ripped in half. However, he then started rocketing upward at dizzying speed. Before he could say Bob's my uncle, he was inhaling breath on Azeroth once more. Ow! He's alive! You did it! Zakan could see Bon Samdi hovering behind Talanji, and although it seemed like the Lower of Graves had just saved him from eternal torment, he still wasn't very happy with the guy. That was terrible! You lied, Bon Samdi! What did you see? Tell me. I saw a pit. A place I would never escape. Torment. Suffering. What else? Spirits. Chains. Darkness. Everything felt so cruel. A place where only evil belongs. It is the place for the unredeemable. But what did I do to deserve that abyss? The Lower then glanced down and heaved a weary sigh. You saw them all, boy. A hopeless place that holds the darkest spirits. But now it be consuming every soul, no matter their deeds in life. Good or evil, thief or prince.
They all go to the moor. Nothing is as it should be. And I'd be keeping as many trolls away from there as I can. And at no small cost either. It's taken all I have just to keep them safe. Which is why you must stop these rebels in Blightcall. If they have their way, nothing will stop all souls from entering the moor. For good.
And then there was silence. Neither the Khan or the Queen knew how to process that bombshell.
How long? How long has this been happening? I saved your father from this fate, if that's what you're asking. The spirit realm. Thrall knew. The shaman told him it was broken. Yeah, he said as much in the throne room. You're the lower of graves one, Sandy. You must know what's going wrong. Sylvanas and the Forsaken are here for you. Tell me why. They be working with forces I cannot see. But whoever be giving the orders wants me gone. And wants all obstacles gone. I'll tell you more, Talanji, but not here. Not like this. The boy needs rest. He's earned that much.
Back in Stormwind? Who the bloody hell's this guy? Well, Anduin was sneaking around in a disguise made up of clothing he'd stolen from lost property and boot polish in his hair, so it was black and smelled like gas. He was currently on his way to the Goldshire Inn. It was kinda exhilarating, leaving his chambers and having the anonymity of a homeless person, especially since life was extremely stressful recently. Nothing but problems. And so, the king thought, sod it, Goldshire Inn. That place never ceases to amaze me. He knew he was acting out, he knew it was stupid, but it was what he needed. Two girls rushed past, one of which made eye contact and showed a slight hint of recognition, which made Anduin almost fall flat on his face. But they ignored him and carried on. Thank God for that. The last thing Anduin needed was to have to explain to his advisors and Jaina why he was skulking around, just like a homeless person, near Goldshire Inn. Might as well draw a sign on his forehead saying, I'm a pervert. Anduin then came across two men outside the inn, arguing and drawing a crowd, about complete nonsense. Apparently they were trying to best each other in some kind of edgiest twat competition. But Anduin went ahead and used the distraction to duck inside. He found a table in the corner, and soon enough, a barmaid approached. She was nice looking, and apparently she liked the cut of his jib too, because when she came back with his beer, she lingered. What's your name?
Jarek. What do I call you?
Amalia.
That's a lovely name.
Amalia then curtsied and went to see to another table, and Anduin felt incredible, almost as if that was the first time he'd spoken to a girl in his life. But that feeling of joy was soon replaced with a feeling of guilt, because he'd bloody lied to her. His name wasn't Jarek. No one's name's Jarek. So he grabbed his beer and started chugging, and as he wiped the remnants of the ale from his lips, he felt guilty again. The door then burst open, and 3 soldiers rushed in. They'd obviously already hit some other pub beforehand, because they looked pretty merry. Plus, they were in the middle of a song, and were muddling up the words a fair bit. Hey! Before Anduin had a chance to look away, all 3 of them whirled in his direction.
Ah, another stalwart recruit. Join us in the song, brother. I'd prefer to drink alone.
Nonsense. Amalia, another, for our nervous Nelly friend here. We'll have him singing and dancing in no time. You're here to be a soldier, you not? I can tell. I can spot a fighter at 20 paces.
She can. She can.
Shut up, brother. There's ale to be had, and glory to savour. Glory in the name of our king. My father died fighting for us. Died fighting the Zoth's fiends in the shadow of a great temple. Or, I don't know, an obelisk? Something. I vowed to take up his sword and carry it myself.
I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sure your father was a brave man.
The barmaid Amalia then returned, setting down 4 fresh tankards, which concerned Anduin a little bit, as he told himself he was only going to have 1 drink. The field of battle. That's where I belong. Where we all belong. For we are the Schnampins. Champions, you drunk knob. Whey! As Anduin studied each of their faces, he wondered how long it would be before they too turned up on a cold slab beneath the Cathedral of Light. They wanted glory, hungered for it, but they had no idea of the cost. A fiddler then started up by the counter, and the 3 soldiers scattered, taking their drinks and leaving. And Anduin decided that he'd had enough. He felt kind of sick, and he felt like someone was watching him. So he got up and walked outside. Hello, Jarek.
I can explain. You're the king. You don't have to explain. Although, what exactly did you do to your hair?
Boot polish. And I suppose Jarek is kind of a dumb name.
Nah, it's a great name. It suits you. It's alright, Anduin. Your secret's safe with me. Jaina, listen. I know we don't always see eye to eye, but you understand, right? Sometimes I need this. Sometimes I need to be a boy again. I think of all those brave soldiers, ready to give their lives for the Alliance, and I think, how? How can they be so young? Those three inside, they think they're ready to die for me. It isn't fair. You're young too, Anduin, and if you need Jerick to help you remember that, then yes, I understand. I mean, hey, I was here too tonight, so at least you can show your face. I just can't. Part of why I need this is because it means I'm not me for a while. I'm dumb, sloppy, probably a shit shoveler Jerick. Well, why don't you go back inside then, Jerick? You've had a long day, shoveling shit.
Meanwhile, in Dazara lore, Talanji was currently racing back to her chambers atop her Ravasaur, Xena, and the beast was moving so quickly that it made speedy Gonzalez look like regular Gonzalez. Although night would soon move closer to dawn, Talanji still felt no closer to victory. In fact, she only felt closer to the opposite of that, death. And, based on the Lower of Grave's recent reveal, the Maw. Bwonsamdi had mentioned it cost him dearly to keep troll souls from the Maw, and it cost Talanji dearly just to walk now. Pain surged through her whole body, and if that wasn't bad enough, one of the surviving Rastari guards from the shrines had informed her of even more bad news.
We saw a witch with the rebels. She was misshapen with injury and wore strange garb, but I've seen her face in the palace countless times before, my queen. It was a Pari, I'm sure of it.
Balls. Her old dear friend. And apparently she wasn't just among the Widow's Bite, she was leading them. Talanji arrived at her chambers and decreed to the guards that she was not to be disturbed. No visitors. She knew one visitor would arrive, but he probably wouldn't be entering via the door. But while she waited for Bwonsamdi to appear, every cell in her weary body was telling her to just lie down. So she climbed into bed. All she wanted to do was sleep, and forget the horrors that seemed to multiply by the hour. A Pari? How could you? As girls, they'd been a couple of pests, causing trouble whenever and wherever they wanted. They played pranks in the gardens, splashed in the pools, stayed up late every night, didn't even get into trouble for it either, thanks to diplomatic immunity. As they grew older, Apari's loyalty never wavered. But the last time Talanji had seen her old friend was not a pleasant memory. 'Twas the day her father died, at the hands of the Alliance. Gnomish siege weapons assaulted the Great Seal, and, as Talanji raced to aid her father, she came across Apari, pinned down by a fallen pillar. "Help me, Tali! I can't move!" In that moment, Talanji had had to weigh impossible scales. Her best friend, or her father. But as princess, her first duty was to her family, and their rule. "I'll send someone for you, Apari. Hold on." The rest of that particular memory was a muddled, distorted mess, mainly because Talanji discovered her father's lifeless husk shortly after that exchange. Had she sent someone to help Apari? Or had she completely forgotten about it?
I've failed so many. There's still time to protect me in your kingdom.
Talanji lifted her head slowly to see Bwonsamdi, all but a ghost. His power was definitely fading. Fading in part because she'd rashly sent her troops to defend the shrines without a plan.
Please, I feel so lost. Please let me see my father. He'd know what to do. Promised I'd protect you, but I can't do it alone. Summon his spirit, Bwonsamdi.
He floated closer, with a grim frown etched across his face, and Talanji dreaded his refusal, so she picked herself up and shuffled over to the balcony. Where was Thrall? Perhaps word had reached him that his ambassador had nearly died at the shrine assault, and so he'd reconsidered his offer of support. And if that were so, then the Zandalari were truly lost.
You need to find your own strength, your own way. It might sound strange coming from the Lower of Graves, but there's always hope, Your Majesty. Death brings life. The great wheel turns. All things that seem eternal end, and then rise to find new purpose. And my father... Shh! Shut your mouth. You're not listening, child. You're only hearing what you want to hear. There is a harmony to things, a way and a flow. Ancient ones, spirits, lower, in time even we must embrace the end. And without us, our followers find strength in other things, in themselves or new beliefs. They grieve, they grow, and when the veil of dreaming lifts, the eternal and great beings climb on the wheel once more, and slowly the wheel spins. What? I am weak but not gone. They will try and take the necropolis now, my place of power. Stop them there, and I will help you rebuild this land.
Talanji looked across her lands and saw them burning and struggling. She still kind of felt like she couldn't do this alone, but Bwonsamdi's words had helped to remind her that the ancient and powerful things of this world were eternal, and so was hope.
I once left my home desperate to save this place. I risked my pride and my life, but I turned to the Horde and they answered my call. They did not let Zandalar stand alone. Tonight, The Horde Ambassador did not let Zandalar stand alone. He nearly gave his life just to save our children. I have to risk my pride and my life once more. I have to believe the Horde will stand with us again, to fight this darkness.
Did you have your fun? Syrah Moonwarden scoffed at Blightcaller's words. Fun? She didn't know the meaning of the word anymore. Not since she'd rose anew in Undeath. Although, she couldn't deny that she was a little bit excited. The shrines had fallen, the Widow's Bite's numbers had grown even larger, and their spirit was at an all-time high. All that remained was the final assault on the necropolis, and then their task would be complete, and Syrah could finally leave wretched Zandalar, and never look back. Those theatrics with the children. I trust that sated your bloodlust for the moment. I never took you for a man with a weak stomach, Blightcaller. Nathanos then rolled his eyes. You risk galvanizing the Zandalari to greater purpose. Our plans have proceeded nicely because the Queen is isolated. Grant her a few Orc battalions and our odds change significantly. They have lost. The storms will cut off any reinforcements by sea, and our traps will slow any soldiers arriving by land. Is this not the hell our Queen seeks to correct? Is this not the hell she will save us from? Teldrassil burned, Darkshore burned. I assure you far more than 2 screaming brats were killed on those occasions. Yes, Syrah, you've made your point. Here comes Visrin. Dark Rangers Visrin and Lelias then approached. They'd gone ahead to scout and stuff. There's a small standing force. The Queen must have sent them, but we have the greater number. They don't stand a chance, sir. The camp is largely pilgrims. We could take prisoners and forego bloodshed. Syrah then fidgeted and looked a bit displeased. You have thoughts, Syrah. They should suffer as we suffer. And life's only pleasure is to spill blood before a loon. The goddess did not save me. I wonder, will anyone come to save this lower? Nathanos then removed his glove and gave a short whistle, causing Apari and Teo to approach. The distinct odour of infection came with them, and Syrah could see the other Widow's Bite followers visibly keeping their distance from Apari, and trying desperately not to hold their noses. The ruins are ours to take. Prepare yourselves. I shall tolerate a short rest after we secure the ruins. And so, Visrin, Lelias, and a whole bunch of rebels swarmed to the east. You do not look well. Lelias is a skilled healer. She could ease the pain in your leg. No, that will not be necessary. Teo flinched at that. Why the bloody hell was Apari being so goddamned proud and stubborn about her shit manky leg? We need you to survive until the lower is no more. That is all I live to see. One Samdi's end and the traitor queen powerless. Startled shouts then rose from the ruins as the ambush started. The rebels and Dark Rangers overran the small encampment pretty quickly, since they were mostly civilians. Not much of a prize for your mistress. But then everything in this jungle is pathetic. Every victory we hand her matters. I claim this one with pride, just as I will claim the necropolis and destroy one Samdi. He will no longer be a threat to Sylvanas. Little stands in her way now, and soon nothing will. Nothing ever stands in her way for long. A short time later, the rebels, Apari and Teo included, had found some corner within the ruins and were catching some much-needed shut-eye. Nathanos and the Dark Rangers, however, had no use for sleep. As Blightcaller observed Apari, he could see the tarnished badge he'd given her glinting around her neck. Many times he'd considered taking it back, either sneaky-like or by force, but each time he'd heard the lovely voice of the Banshee Queen at the back of his mind, urging him to let go of such things. Trinkets and trifles. The unimportant relics of life. His loyalty to Sylvanas did not hinge on such things, so he just sort of wandered off towards the broken bridge that once joined the ruins to the necropolis. He always felt restless on the eve of battle, but this time felt a bit different. Some nagging feeling at the back of his mind, like a faint memory was trying to claw its way out of his subconscious. He had things to do, a letter to write to Sylvanas to let her know of their progress, but something was drawing him forward, into the mist. And then, a gold coin appeared out of nowhere and splashed into a puddle near his feet. Hello, Nathanos. Nathanos bent down and picked up the gold coin, and felt the familiar emblem etched into it with his thumb. You're not real. You died a long time ago. Before him stood his cousin, Stefan Maris, who had indeed died a long time ago, ending up as nothing more than a pile of goo on a table, after his body became the raw materials used to build Nathanos anew. Why did you let her do it? I was your cousin, Nathanos. I looked up to you. I wanted to be you, but not like this. I had no choice. Nathanos couldn't even look his cousin in the eyes, but continued. I needed a new body, so you stole mine. That was Sylvanas' decision. I could not be made whole without the sacrifice of a family member, and yet still you serve her.
After what she did to me. After what she did to our family. I'm the only ghost that moves you, but how many ghosts have you given others? How many men now live tormented by the loved ones you murdered in service to your vicious queen?
Stefan's expression then changed, no longer friendly, and an odd blue light started to suffuse his skin.
Your queen has made some nasty friends on the other side. The power she's been granted can be taken away. The Lords of Death will never let her win. Her power is nothing next to theirs. As she is chained to undeath, she is chained to the forces of the Shadowlands. You know nothing of it. You do not know her as I do.
Stefan's face then dissolved completely into a hideous grinning skull, and it was at that point that Nathanos realised this was nothing more than trickery and magic. One Samdi, of course.
You're in my world now, boy. This be my game, and you be playing it by my rules. You're finished, Bon Samdi.
Yeah, we'll be seeing about that. And with that, Bon Samdi, or the vision he'd sent, vanished, and Nathanos, who had absolutely been triggered by that whole exchange, stomped his way back to the ruins.
They've taken Zobal, my queen. Blightcaller and his rangers have been sighted moving on the necropolis. What are your orders? We've run out of time. We march on the necropolis.
All on our lonesome, Talanji thought. Thrall had not returned with his horde reinforcements, leaving the Zandalari with an army of only about 40 soldiers. Probably wasn't going to be enough against the sly, skilled rangers of Sylvanas. But Talanji still had hope, thanks to Bon Samdi's weird speech in the last chapter.
We should go now, before it gets too hot for marching. Rakan, give the signal.
So Rakan went ahead and did that. He pulled out a war horn and gave it a big blow, and the soldiers shouted their response, and then the marching began.
I will keep my promise to you, Bon Samdi, though it may mean the end of us both.
However, the small Zandalari army hadn't been marching very long at all before a second war horn sounded from back within the city.
Did you hear that?
Talanji immediately turned Xena around and made her way back past her very confused small army, and as she crossed the bridge, she saw War Druid Loti racing towards her. The Horde! They just started appearing, Your Majesty. As the Queen looked down towards the bazaar and port, she could see quite a few Horde banners flying, and was definitely pleased to see them. But
there's more. The people in the markets, they're going a bit mad. They think it's an invasion.
The Queen had feared as much. Thanks to the storms preventing anyone from travelling to the continent, Thrall must have used portals to transfer his troops, which meant there were challenging times ahead. Even if they did somehow succeed in defeating the Widow's Bite, it was going to take time to undo Apari and Blightcaller's meddling and false rumours. But the priority right now was to protect Bon Samdi.
Find Lashk. Go with him to the bazaar. Quell whatever fears you find there and then join us at the necropolis.
So Loti went off to do that, whilst Talanji rode quickly back to the vanguard. And soon enough, the Horde caught up.
Forgive the lateness. This was all that could be gathered without leaving Orgrimmar undefended. Will it be enough?
It will have to be. It is far more than we had. Thank you. Zandalar will not forget this.
In truth, the amount of Horde soldiers that had arrived was around 40 as well. So basically, the army was now twice as big.
How many cavalry?
Only us, Rakan and Zalani. But Loti will ride to join us when my people have been assured this is not an invasion.
Perhaps with our forces divided, we can attack from two sides. Send the cavalry up the center, try to trap Blightcaller in the middle.
That will be difficult. The necropolis is surrounded by swamp. The safest approach is from the Zobal ruins, which Blightcaller now holds.
That will pose no challenge to our shaman. They can pass on top of the wall.
And with some recovery, I can teleport a number of us wherever you desire. Gives us the element of surprise at least. Nope, no surprise I'm afraid. There's a clear view in every direction from the necropolis.
Then speed is our greatest asset. How long do you need, Thalyssra? Could you send some of our warriors ahead?
I'll give it a go.
The army then began their advance again, for reals this time, and as they moved through the jungle, a million thoughts assaulted Talanji's brain. Mainly, that she should have believed in and trusted Thrall, and the Horde. Bon Samdi had been right, and she'd been unreasonably proud, and a bit of an idiot. And that's ignoring the fact that about halfway through this book she was like, okay, I'll do it. And then she just didn't do it. But her mind then drifted to Zakan, and she suddenly realised she should probably inform the Horde that their ambassador nearly died.
Zakan was badly wounded. At the shrines. My healers have seen to him and say he'll live, but...
He is a strong boy, and he understood the risks. Thalyssra, how many of us can you safely bring to the necropolis?
The first Arcanist reached into her pocket, pulled out a flask and took a long swig from it, and her eyes brightened as if she'd just taken a drink of pure light.
Give me a moment and I can teleport the entire host.
You want me?
Well, that settles it then. We divide into three forces and give them no chance to retreat.
To sea. The necropolis lies along our northern border. They could escape by sea. The storms are under their control, after all. That is why we target the mages first.
And why Lothamar and Gaslow are sailing with all speed. Once the storms break, they'll cut off any retreat.
Talanji couldn't help but gaze in admiration at her companions. They'd literally thought of everything, almost as if they'd been involved in a few battles before or something.
Okay then, let's do this. For the safety of my people, and for the Horde. Where the bloody hell is he? Why does he not appear?
Sira Moonwarden was currently pacing around in a circle, very impatiently, whilst Nathanos was being a bit calmer and not pacing around in a circle. There was an eerie silence persisting within the necropolis, but the Ranger General was determined to see this whole thing through to the end.
You must know Bwonsamdi is a trickster. Where is he, witch? I honour our friendship. I honour our bargain.
We're not friends.
Do not waste our time with flattery. We desire only the lower. How do we summon him?
Sira stepped towards Apari and loomed over her, all intimidating like. But Apari didn't shrink away, and her bodyguard, Teo, bared her teeth.
Like this.
A bunch of Widow's Bite rebels then approached, dragging bound and squirming hostages behind them. Nathanos had assumed that Apari's followers had entered the temple simply to scavenge for stuff, but now he was starting to understand.
Supplicants. Noise. These are Bwonsamdi's faithful worshippers.
Darkness take you! The old troll spat towards Nathanos, and his spittle landed right on his target's face, but the Ranger General just sighed and wiped it off.
I see. In that case, I too shall dispense with the pleasantries. There is no need to torture and kill the child. You are Bwonsamdi's faithful, are you not? Prove your faith sufficient, summon the lower here, and all of you will live.
Nathanos shot Sira a quick glance after her scoff, as if to reassure her that he was in fact lying, and of course these trolls were not going to live.
What is your name? Tezzy. Very well, Tezzy. Let us be reasonable. Help us reach Bwonsamdi and you will all be spared. We worship the lower of death, strange one. We come here every day. You don't scare us. Nothing scares us.
Do not break, Tezzy. They are scum. Bwonsamdi will protect us. Whoa!
Make your offering, old man, or this goes in the child's mouth.
Apari reached inside her pouch and pulled out a pinch of black powder, and the child on the ground gave a yelp.
Wretchweed and riverbud root. Her insides will be coming out of her eyeballs. Is that what you want?
However, Teo then dived toward Apari. She's just a child. But Apari immediately struck Teo across the face, and the slap left her absolutely stunned.
I am on the very precipice of death, Zagota. I will live just to see Bwonsamdi and Talanji fall. Nothing, not this girl, not you, will stop me.
Nathanos didn't exactly know what Zagota meant, but he understood that it probably wasn't that friendly, and Teo then marched off, back towards the Zobal ruins in a strop.
She'll come crawling back. She always does. We have no need of her anyway. Now, where were we? Of course. Tezzy, my new friend. You will cooperate or the child will be harmed.
Do it! Nathanos couldn't help but admire the child's spirit, but also felt like this was the weirdest, most mature child he'd ever seen. But he went ahead and pulled a dagger from his belt.
For example, I will take her brash little tongue. I'll do what you ask, but I've no more power over a lower than a mouse over a snake. Scamper over to the altar then, mouse, and be quick about it.
So the old troll went ahead and did that. He dropped to his knees, picked up one of the ancient drums lying around on the ground, and began to thump it with the heels of his hands. He then started to chant in a low, haunting rasp, and this went on for bloody ages.
We know you're watching, Bwonsamdi. Appear to us lower, or your followers will soon be walking your spirit realm.
And no response. Balls.
The girl. Start with her fingers. Flay them first, remove them slowly.
Nathanos took no delight in this. It was just what needed to be done. The Banshee Queen wanted Bwonsamdi gone. Nothing else mattered.
Wait.
Blightcaller then turned to see Sira peering down into the court, and as he followed her line of sight, he saw the mists and fog below had begun to spin, creating a vortex. And then, poof.
Old Bwonsamdi is here, friends. What be all this racket about? Rangers, at the ready. At last. You think you have me surrounded? I have my own army, little dead thing. Soon my queen will be here. You've been sneaky so far, can't deny it, but you won't stand a chance against her armies. Armies? He's bluffing. By the time she arrives, you will be destroyed. Sir, give the command.
Fire! Arrows began to fall, screaming towards Bwonsamdi from dark ranges surrounding the court. However, a massive spirit suddenly flooded out of the ground beneath Bwonsamdi and started to charge.
You'll be in my world now.
My house! Talanji and the Horde leadership arrived at the outskirts of the Zobal ruins, just in time to see a crack of lightning ripple down from the sky and hit somewhere inside the necropolis. They're already attacking him. We have to move. Thrall, Bane and Talanji then raced forward, with 20 Orc soldiers and the vanguard of Rastarian forces marching behind. Bane's shaman carried on to the east, with the intention of crossing the swamp using their power to walk across water, and Thelyssera's Nightborn archers were to take the western approach, attack from 3 sides, as per Thrall's recommendation a few chapters ago. However, as the main force passed through Zobal, a troll popped up out of nowhere. My name is Teo. I serve the witch Apari.
Give us one good reason not to take your head.
I serve her no longer. She is not the leader I knew, the leader I admired. This cruelty is not her. Her hate for you, Your Majesty. It's all she has.
Then fight with us. Help us stop her.
Teo looked at each of them, a little bit wary.
I will. All I ask is that you give her a merciful end. Death is already about to claim her. Just make it swift.
Done.
Talanji bit her tongue. She wasn't overly happy about trusting Teo, and she wasn't entirely sure Apari deserved mercy.
The bridge is riddled with traps and mines. They knew you might come, so don't go that way.
Thrall then reached into his pack and pulled out a few silver orbs.
What are those?
A gift from our clever trade prince. Goblin Seeker bots. Be ready to charge.
The orbs made their way across the bridge and cracked open, producing 6 mini contraptions that looked like tiny little men. And the tiny little men bounced their way this way and that, until they collided with a trap and exploded. R.I.P. tiny little men. Thrall, without any hesitation, then started making his own way across the bridge, and Talanji, Bane and Teo followed. As the smoke from the exploded mines cleared, they saw the chaos. One Samdi, gritting his teeth as he summoned spirit after spirit. Rebels, who had already suffered several losses, with bodies littering the ground. And the Dark Rangers, with Apari, Nathanos and some armoured elf bitch stood among them. Is this all you can muster? Pathetic. Do not let them reach the lower.
Don't underestimate her. Wardens are formidable.
Thrall then started to swing his axe and windmill a whole bunch of troll rebels trying to swarm him, and Bane joined the fight too. Initially, Talanji looked desperately to the east and west, wondering what the bloody hell was taking the shaman and archers so long. But now was not the time for complaining and feeling sorry for yourself. Now was the time for fighting. So she went ahead and started blasting death magic and casting protective barriers and stuff. However, a blinding spear of lightning struck the barrier she'd conjured around Bane. 'Twas Apari. The Queen quickly refocused, giving Bane another barrier, and then started making her way through the chaos towards her former Bezzy. But as she drew closer, a weird shape zipped towards the Queen and smacked right into her face. And it took a few moments of severe pain before Talanji realised there was a bloody dread tick on her head. However, as she lost her balance and fell to the ground, the creature became dislodged and bounced away, and 2 massive totems then came smashing down and smushed the little twat. But there was no time to stop and thank Bane. Talanji picked herself up and pressed forward. The next thing Talanji had to contend with was the fact that Apari, who was probably a bit pissed off that her pet had just been smushed, was in the process of calling down another lightning strike. Apari laughed maniacally as she brought down the storm, but Talanji reacted quickly, throwing her arms wide and conjuring yet another magic barrier. And it worked even better than she'd hoped, because the lightning bounced off it, arced across the battlefield, and punched Apari right in the chest. And the Widow's Bite leader then shot backwards, flying into a pillar.
Here, we can give her mercy together.
Talanji didn't hesitate to take Teo's hand, and the 2 of them then forced their way through more rebels, until eventually they reached their target. What was left of Talanji's childhood friend was pretty unpleasant to look at. Legs sprawled out in front of her with blood dripping down her cheeks. She'd hit the pillar very hard and cracked her skull open. Talanji, however, knelt down beside Apari, cradled her neck, and tried to smile.
I'm sorry, Apari. The siege. My father was dying. I wanted to help him, but I should have stayed to help you too. You can rest now. It's all over. It's not over. You should die for what you did to me. To my mother. You should die. Vengeance will only take you so far. You need more than that to survive. I did not help you then, my friend, but I will help you now.
Talanji held Apari's hands and looked deep into her sad, terrified eyes. She then cast a soothing spell, hoping it would at least ease Apari's pain a little bit. Life had not been kind to the girl, but once she was gone, her body would nourish the earth, and one Samdi would keep her spirit from the maw. It was ironic, really. She'd wanted the lower dead, but it was he who would now save her from everlasting darkness. The Queen then squeezed her old friend's hands whilst Teo drew her blade, and then boof, it was all over. With Apari dead, the rebels scattered. However, Sira Moonwarden did not retreat. Although Nathanos was nowhere to be seen, the Warden and a few nearby Dark Rangers continued to fight. right up until some war horns sounded and a bunch of Tauran shaman and Nightborn archers finally arrived. The Dark Rangers soon fell, and Bane smashed Syrah right in the gut with his totem that was still covered in bits of smushed Dreadtick. Do not look at me with those gloating eyes. Nathanos! Nathanos! I will not be abandoned again. Not now. You have accomplished nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing. Well, Thrall then cracked her helmet with the blunt end of his axe, which stunned her to silence.
Bind her tightly. I know exactly what to do with her.
An unnatural cackle then rippled out from within the necropolis, and Talanji raced towards it. And when she arrived, she saw Bwonsamdi, beside himself with amusement, whilst Nathanos Blightcaller was having a bit of a tantrum. I told you, dead man. You're no match for my queen. Talanji wasn't going to let Bwonsamdi face Nathanos alone, even though she had basically exhausted herself by this point and had very little left to give in terms of strength. But she had something else. Something better. Aloa's power comes from his believers. Mighty Bwonsamdi, lower of graves, your strength is mine, my strength is yours. Nathanos had enough sense to know at this point that he'd lost, so he just kind of glared at them as they escorted him back outside. I will swing the axe for what he has done to my people. Unlike Syrah, Blightcaller gave no taunt, no mockery. He simply sheathed his bow, pulled a vial from his coat, uncorked it, and bowed his head. My lady. And out of nowhere, a liquid tendril of purple and black emerged, enveloped him, and swallowed him whole. Thrall raced forward, but he was too late. Nathanos was gone. Well, guess he slipped away. He be tricksy indeed, just like your old pal Bwonsamdi. I, however, plan to live a lot longer than him. There was a murmur amongst the Horde and Zandalari forces as they all slowly realised they'd won, and it was over. And that murmur soon grew to loud cheers and hoorays and stuff. But Thrall looked kind of disappointed about the fact that Nathanos escaped. Don't look so sad, Thrall. You came for me and here I am. Whatever the Banshee Queen had planned here today, you stopped her. He's right. The Horde stood together as one behind our ally. Not just an ally. I wish to take my place on the Horde Council. It is where I belong. Speaking for my people and listening for them. Our armies must be rebuilt, our city secured, and the trust of the people won. But we will emerge stronger than ever. How very touching. Bwonsamdi pretended to wipe a tear from his face sarcastically, but Talanji could see the look of relief in the lower's eyes. Now, I believe I owe you all a feast. No assassins this time. You have my word. Matthias Shaw had never sailed a Zandalari ship before, but he learned pretty damn quickly. The Horde leadership had let him go. No strings attached. And although he was initially filled with suspicion, he wasn't going to punch a gift horse in the mouth. That didn't stop him from inspecting the ship from top to bottom, upon boarding it though, just to make sure there weren't any nasty surprises. But all he found was nice surprises. Queen Talanji had stocked the ship full of fresh leftovers from their celebratory feast. Plus, they'd thrown an extra bit of precious cargo into the brig, for Shaw to deliver. Stormwind City rose up from the horizon, so Shaw turned to the sour-faced Vrykul captain. Do you have papers? Papers? I have you. Fair enough. As the ship pulled into the harbour, Jaina Proudmoore, Anduin Wrynn, and Flint Fairwind were waiting. Did they mistreat you? They had bigger problems. I'll tell you about it later. There's something you need to see. Flynn didn't wait a moment longer to shove Anduin aside, rushed towards Matthias and give him a tight, warm hug, which Matthias returned. Flynn, there's something I'd like to talk to you about. Meet me at the Gilded Rose tonight, will you? Don't be late. Myers then slowly released Flynn from their embrace and slid the perfect blade of grass into the pirate's hand that he'd got from that guard in the prison that time. But Flynn didn't exactly look sure what he was supposed to do with that piece of grass, but he kind of blushed. And then Anduin went ahead and cock-blocked them. What is so urgent? It is better if I simply show you. Come. Syrah, the Horde gave it to you. No strings attached. There are always strings, even if you cannot see them. Thrall wanted her delivered to Tyrande, Whisperwind and Malfurion Stormrage, along with this letter. That is oddly generous of him. I agree. It will be done. But first, I will have a word with the prisoner. Something had changed in Syrah at the mention of Tyrande and Malfurion. She was still full of rage, but their names added fear into the mix. Where is she? Where is Sylvanas Windrunner? Nowhere you will find her. Even if you did, it's far too late. You've lost. My spies tell me the opposite is true. You were unsuccessful in destroying Bwonsamdi. Your Dark Ranger forces were annihilated, and Blightcaller only escaped because your mistress intervened. Do you know how many deaths you've caused? How much misery you've brought upon my kingdom? Do you even care? Syrah said nothing, but just smiled. Smile all you like, creature. There's little hope for you now. Your people will want to speak with you. Want to know how you could serve Sylvanas.
You realise this, yes? I know it, and I feel nothing. I will give them nothing. Once more you waste the little time you have left.
Anduin grunted in disgust, and then stared at her for a long and tense spell. However, a wisp of purple energy then travelled down his arm and gathered in his palm, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. It startled Anduin enough to make him stumble backward, and as he looked at Jaina, the fear on her face was enough to shake him to his core, and Sira threw her head back and laughed. Tell me, how does it feel to know you've lost? Take heart, Falling Lion. You will serve well. You will serve well. Duranda Whisperwind, Chandris Feathermoon, and Maiev Shadowsong stepped through their portal and arrived in the Stormwind Stockades. Anduin's message had mentioned a gift from the Horde, whilst the sealed letter from Thrall had managed expectations, advising that this was not what was owed, but hopefully it was a start. The three elves made their way through the dark and dank corridors until they reached an iron door, and as they entered the cell, the prisoner raised her head. You, Sira, security measures in Stormwind seem somewhat lax of late. I am the Night Warrior. No way is shut to me. Is that so? What about the way of compassion? Of loyalty? Are you finished? Suppose I am. You've come here to kill me, is that it? Elune abandoned me. You abandoned me. My sister warriors and you did nothing to save me. I have nothing left to fear. You have me. Fear you? Don't be ridiculous. You, with all the rage of the Dark Moon, have done nothing to avenge your people. You are wind, Duranda. Impotent, worthless, cowardly wind. I wish I could have done more to protect you, but some natures prove too evil to curb, too ambitious to abide. Sylvanas has such a nature, and I will not forget that. You are her servant now, Sira, and I have not forgotten that either. Duranda then drew her sword, making a big song and dance of it, so Sira could plainly see what was happening. Duranda, think. Look. I see a sad and defeated thing that has chosen a path. Nothing more. I chose nothing. I did not choose to return. Everything inside me is ugliness and rage, and the only thing that quiets the scream is death. Maiev Shadowsong then reached out and placed a hand on Duranda's forearm, but the Night Warrior just shrugged it off. I knew you once to find a fawn with 2 snapped legs. A fawn pretty much everyone claimed was beyond healing. Many offered to end its suffering, but you saw inside it a spark of life, a hidden light. And it died. What's your point? How long did you try? If you continue down this path, Duranda, you will find yourself no better than Sira. She is in agony. Can you not see it? Her only relief comes from spilling blood. Is this what you want? To find your only comfort in the suffering of others? And so I should just do nothing? That isn't what I'm saying, and you know it. Listen, Duranda. I have lived as one consumed, and although there is no great love between us, I would not see you become what I was, what Sira is now. You're more than just rage and vengeance. You are a priestess and a leader. Take pity on this creature. Duranda raised her blade, her wrist twitching. You will not. You lack the... However, before Sira could say balls or courage or whatever she was going to say, Duranda struck, swift and true, cutting an opening in Sira's neck no deeper than the width of a fingernail. There was no blood, because Sira had none to shed, but the corrupted undead warden still clutched at her throat. And Duranda shuddered. She'd thought to feel nothing, but that shallow cut had made her feel horribly alive. Mercy for that little hidden light. Mercy for a sad, defeated thing. Duranda nodded. Chandris and Maiev no doubt had things they wanted to ask Sira, but the Night Warrior was finished. She'd seen what she needed to see, so she turned to go. But before she left the room completely, she had one more thing to say. Alas, Sira, I do possess the courage, and that is what frightens me. That is what should frighten us all. After that meal, I'm tempted to stick around. The port of Zandalar was busier than ever, all thanks to the skies now being clear and the lanes for commerce being safe once more. Onsamdi's shrines were already being rebuilt, and word of his heroic stand at the necropolis had spread. The Lower of Graves was not quite back to his full strength yet, but Talanji knew it was only a matter of time, and she was feeling a whole lot better herself. Not just physically, but emotionally as well. Sure, she still felt kinda pissy about Jaina Proudmoore and the Alliance's assault on her city, but she now realised that patience would win that war, and that the Horde weren't just a bunch of useless jerks. Thanks for the hospitality, my dear. Please do visit Orgrimmar soon. There's much the Council will wish to discuss. Plus we can hang out, I know all the best places. You saved my city, First Arcanist. I will definitely visit soon. Thalyssra then stepped aside, allowing some of the others to say their goodbyes. The bandaged Zakatan hobbled up, with Thrall providing the young troll with a bit of support. Thrall himself still looked pretty sad. Losing to Thanos had clearly angered him, but he was doing his best not to be a buzzkill.
Brave, honourable ambassador, how do I thank you for your sacrifice? With a kiss?
Actually, no.
I'm crispy all over. It was my pleasure to serve, Your Majesty. I hope we meet again soon. You packed your salves, yes? And the special poultices? Tell me you have, Zakan. Don't make a queen fuss so in public. I must see to my people here. We must heal and learn to trust one another again. When Zandalar is strong, you will see me in Orgrimmar, Zakan. I'll bring my royal physicians with me just in case.
The Horde is united and our purpose is clear. When you feel ready, join us in the hunt.
The hunt for Sylvanas Windrunner seemed like an impossible task to search the entirety of Azeroth, but Talanji had made a promise, and she'd be a jerk not to help the Horde after they'd just helped her.
Oh, almost forgot. Hope you don't mind taking one more with you.
Talanji then spun around, scanned the crowd, until eventually she spotted Teo.
Teo wishes to act as my ambassador. She will be my eyes and ears, just as Zakan was for you.
Without her, we would have been torn to pieces by Blightgoller's traps. She's welcome among us.
I'm Zakan. I promise I'm pretty handsome under here. Or I will be, once my hair grows back.
And that was that. Thelyssera opened a portal, and the Horde left. And much to Talanji's surprise, she was kind of sad. The city felt much emptier without them. But the Queen's work was never done, so she made her way back to the Great Seal to hold court and talk to her people and stuff. First up was a young girl who skipped up to the Queen and pressed a squashed purple flower into her hand.
Thank you. I don't know if I'm worthy of your gift, but I will endeavour to be so. Mother says you're not worthy. Are you going to make us worship Bwonsamdi? Please don't make us worship him. I like Gonk. Of course you do. Everybody loves Gonk. You should give him many offerings and sing chants to him every day. We need all of our lower small one. For our soldiers to grow big and strong. For our fields and seas to flourish. For the health of the Zandalari people. And Bwonsamdi is not so bad. He helped us fight off the rebels. And he protects our souls. Keeps us safe. Then, Mother is wrong. She is right to worry. But tell her that all lower will be whispering in my ear. All will advise me. That is my promise to her and to you.
Oakley dokily! The child squealed with delight and raced off, and a whole bunch of other people then spoke, asking their questions and making their requests, right up until the sun went down and it got dark, at which point Talanji retired to her chambers.
Big words you said to that little girl today. Words you do not agree with.
Bwonsamdi then shrugged.
We had a deal. You protect me, our bond is broken, the pact undone. I keep my promises, girl. Come forward.
But Talanji did not come forward. She just sat down on her bed instead.
I've thought about it. What I said to that girl is true. You must relinquish some of your say in matters, Bwonsamdi. You are still the lower of kings, but Gonk, Paku, Akunda, all the lower. They are crucial to our survival.
Might be I'm not the foremost expert on crops and the like. 'Tis a fair deal, unless there's a trick here I'm not seeing.
No more tricks, Bwonsamdi. I've had my fill. Then we can make each other strong. I'm not foolish enough to think this will be the last of my troubles. The last time our kingdom is threatened. I want power, but I want it on my terms this time. But I still be the lower of kings. You still be the lower of kings.
Yes! I suppose our bargain is amended, then. But I warn you, Talanji,
don't gloat. This battle is won, but not the war. A time will come when you be tested, and that time is coming soon. Why'd you have to ruin it? I hate it when you talk that way, it frightens me.
Good. It should.
I have one more thing. I'm exhausted, Bwonsamdi. I think you'll like this.
Bwonsamdi then winked, stepped aside and revealed a familiar silhouette standing behind him.
Talanji, my girl.
The Queen gasped and rushed towards her father.
You've grown wiser and stronger, just as I knew you would. I'm proud of the Queen you've become. I made so many mistakes, Father. I don't know if our people will ever trust me again.
At that, Rastakhan laughed gently and hushed her, but his spirit then started to waver a little bit.
What's happening? Bwonsamdi? Say what you must and quickly. The other side be too unpredictable these days. Show me the perfect Queen, Talanji, and I'll show you a monument of stone. Perfect rulers live only in memory. Your mistakes will be forgotten when your victories and triumphs come. You've already faced so much. I wish I could be there to guide you. You do. You guide me every day. It's time I returned you to my care, Rastakhan.
The king nodded and took one last look at his daughter.
Remember, Talanji, you are more than just my daughter. More than blood. You are the queen Zandalar deserves. You will make your ancestors proud, as you have already made me.
To wield so much power.
That power will be your prison.
This world is a prison. Set us all free.
My champion, your timing could not be better. Tell me of your victory as we take these first steps together.
Nathanos got to his feet, and Sylvanas noticed a tremble in his hands.
I failed you, my queen. Bwonsamdi lives. Zero Moon Warden has been captured. I could not carry out your command. The Horde, they came in force. They resisted us. I fear that Bwonsamdi will only grow more defiant now.
Sylvanas shifted her gaze away from his blubbering lips to the tower looming above. She'd felt so triumphant a minute ago, beating Bolvar and shattering the Helm of Domination and tearing the edge of reality open and stuff. But Nathanos' failure had really put a downer on things.
The jerk? What are you still doing here? I will return to the Maris stead, my lady, and await your orders. Go where you will, Nathanos, but do not be idle. The Lower knows the Shadowlands well. I expect you will return to me with means to prevent his meddling. My path lies ahead.
And off she went, towards the promise of more power. She had been the plaything of a self-righteous cosmos long enough, but not anymore. 'Twas the jailer that knew what really needed to be done, because that guy can definitely be trusted. And we're leaving it there! You still here? Cheers, mate. This took like 5 months to make, and I worked kind of hard on it, so thanks for taking the time to watch it all and stuff. I get weird comments from people sometimes that think because I make jokes and say sarcastic things, I must hate Warcraft. And I always think, who the f would dedicate this amount of time making videos about something they hated? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Anyway, links in the links in the description for the book and my Patreon page and Discord and stuff. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, all of that bollocks. And all that's left to say is, thanks for watching, and see ya!